the August 4th Economic Development Subcommittee meeting. And with that, we're going to jump right into our agenda tonight. First item up on the agenda is an update on our UMass Boston downtown project that we're planning on doing. And Professor Wiggins is, Jack Wiggins is here tonight. And I appreciate you coming in again. Thank you.
Hey, Jeff. You're welcome. Glad to be here again.
Awesome.
Again, good to see you all.
Awesome.
I had sent a revised proposal following the meeting we had on May 14th, and my intention in that revision was to capture the comments that you made during that meeting, and I hope I did that. And I can very briefly go over what those changes were. There were a number of language changes and wording insertions and so forth that I thought improved the narrative a little bit. And Marina had given us some comments on the first version as well, which are incorporated. But in general, and to simplify things, there were 5 or 6 areas that I think reflect the comments that were made at the last meeting. One was the project area. People made the comment that it might be useful if we could imagine expanding the area either in the central downtown area or to other commercial areas if that became possible and of interest to the subcommittee. So I incorporated that. Under task 2 in that proposal I sent, I noted that we would be participating in meetings of the subcommittee, the planning board, and others as appropriate. I mean, I think you anticipated that, but I added in the planning board as there are some projects I think on pending now that might be useful for us to, if nothing else, to witness how it's done. Task 4 emphasized the focus is on the engagement with stakeholders, especially the business community. You all have, as well as I have, gone through the recent planning documents and reports that have been done, and there was quite a bit of public participation surveys, focus groups, and so forth that have already been done. We, of course, will begin with that. That will be our jumping off point, all of the work that's been done in the past, the findings that were made at that time. When we put together our profile of the community in order to embed the students kind of in understanding what the community is all about, we'll be using those materials, but we'll use those materials then to jump off into a process whereby, directed by you, we'll be looking for community input on what people currently are thinking about, especially, and I think you all emphasize the business community in particular, so I increase the emphasis on that. We'll be cataloging the issues, the goals, the objectives, and needs from reports and our outreach. And that will become a deliverable to you. We'll prepare case studies of successful downtown revitalization, including strategies, tools, and insights from those involved. And I think personally, this would probably be the most useful thing that we'll likely do for you. In other words, we are going to look at other examples of where downtown revitalization has occurred and interview those communities and find out what it was that they did, both in terms of what the conditions were prior to the revitalization, what the conditions are post, what they believe, the strategies that they employed that were successful, what tools did they employ, whether that's regulatory or programmatic or outreach or whatever that might be, and then insight from those local officials. I think last time I was here I mentioned that the community I live in and served on the planning board for a number of years did a downtown revitalization of one of our centers. It was quite successful. I interviewed that director of community development already and got the materials for that. So we'll start with that kind of thing. We'll put together a series of case studies that will all be prepared in the same way, with the same format, so that you can get through them easily and see what it is that we felt might be, what the communities felt were the most successful strategies that they used and that we believe would be transferable to the conditions in Franklin. And then we'll prepare those scenarios and narratives in map form. And then you were quite interested in visuals of alternative development schemes, and we'll prepare that probably towards the end of the project. Some different ways of looking at what the possibilities might be. And I would imagine that those alternatives would be centered around a theme, for example, whether it be cultural or historic resources, whether it be open space, whether it be increasing the amount of locally based retail, whatever this theme might be. We'll prepare scenarios that will kind of illustrate different ways of looking at what downtown redevelopment might look like. So I think I captured that. You stressed to me that that what was lacking was a vision that was a shared vision among particularly the downtown business community and the community at large. And so I'm taking that as the sort of the core of the charge to come up with what a vision might be for downtown Franklin. I did note, I think it was the Franklin for All, that was kind of the charge for that study as well. And it's presented in there, and I am curious to hear from you whether that vision didn't capture what the community was interested in, or whether it was just never, people didn't understand it. And that might be part of the challenge we have as well. In other words, to create a shared vision and then get the buy-in on that vision. And so that's my understanding of the project. If I have it wrong, that's what I'm here to hear tonight from you all, where I can tinker with this and get it more in line with what you're thinking.
Okay. Well, I'll turn it over to the members first. Caroline, I'll start to my right. Ladies always first.
All right. I think you're right. I think that is the right charge. I would say that I think the problem that we've had is certainly the willingness for people to invest in a shared vision. I think downtown has been, we can get people to say, okay, I like this idea, and then we struggle with the next steps. We struggle with getting, okay, now how do we make this happen? And are we willing to make this happen? And can we invest in making this happen? And who's going to do that? And so I think that has been the reason that the shared vision sometimes stalls. So I think we talked about this last time, and I think you hit on it. I think it's really important to make sure that we have not only an idea, but kind of what are those practical next steps if we were to take the suggestions, the ideas that you and your students create, and then how would we make that happen? What is the practical plan to putting that into action? So I think that is probably the most I would like to see come out of this. I will say there is a big project right now going in design. Are you aware of that?
I looked at the materials. Yep.
Okay. All right. So that it hasn't even come before the planning board. That's next week. So I don't know where that's going to be in September, but it's certainly worth keeping in mind that there might be this new development there. There might not be. We don't know. That's all I have to comment on right now.
Okay. Perfect.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First off, I just want to thank you and your students for this. This is an amazing opportunity and partnership, and I just want to let you know how much I personally appreciate that you've been able to bring this to the table, and I think it's an enormous asset to the town to be able to work with you. I think that in terms of the Franklin for All study, I mean, originally we had the study, and then they tried to build upon it with a master plan, and then we're still sort of working on implementing both of those things. And so I kind of see it more as maybe, A, buy-in issue, and B, implementation issue, as well as I think there was a lot of people, there's a concern about overdevelopment, and that kind of put the brakes on a lot of things as well. So how do you balance those things, and how do you, as a town, we have limited resources with overrides. We don't have the manpower to do everything, and the downtown partnership doesn't have the manpower to do everything. And so how do you get that buying culture? It might be more of a systemic. It might not be a zoning issue at all. It might be more of an implementation, systemic, cultural, organizational issue.
Right.
And then when you have these products, how do you value them? And you know, look up to them rather than put them in a shelf. You know, so I just don't want us to repeat the mistakes of the past.
Right.
And, you know, if you could build upon the Franklin for All study, and I mean, I would not discard it. You know, I would probably build upon it, and you know, if there was a voices that were missing from that, you know, acknowledging that, or if there was, you know, but I definitely think that it's worth improving upon rather than because this is a real resource of information. So.
Right.
So that's all I have, unless you have any questions for me.
What I liked about it best was that, you know, among those 3 studies, and there's probably others too that I haven't looked at yet, they're all recent,
Yeah.
and their recommendations were fine, and each one of them had sort of a different approach to it. So there's plenty of material there. And so just like some of these other case studies that we hope to uncover, there's just something that needs to change. And what we're hoping is that if we choose enough case studies and the right case studies, that those scenarios will provide sort of insight into what the problem was and how they get around that problem. I know from my own experiences that getting the property owners to see the fact that there's greater development potential in their properties, and I know why they don't do it all the time, but just somehow triggering that interest and getting people to do it. And there's you know, any number of reasons why they don't. And so I do think this idea of a shared vision of the downtown is probably a key to it in one part of it.
And one other thing I'll add is I appreciate you talking about, you know, in the future maybe looking at other scopes or other phases. I didn't articulate myself. I didn't have the zoning map in front of me, but commercial 2 specifically as a zone, if you look on both sides of 140, it's a mess. You know, you just see parking lots, and you know, this doesn't seem to be as much of a rhyme or reason to have it's developed. So I think a lot of the, especially with Stobart's, that issue, I think might be attributable to how that, I don't think we should reduce the density per se, but I think how it's structured. You know, in downtown we talk about putting up parking lots in the back.
Right.
Well, why can't we do that for commercial too? You know, is there some way we can make it look prettier while still maintaining the functionality of that zone?
Right.
And I think that we've done a lot of studies about downtown, but we haven't done anything about commercial too.
Okay.
And
Okay. Got it.
All set?
I'll say.
Thanks, Mike. Thank you again for coming, Professor. I think you touched on some of the comments I was going to make in terms of how important it is to do that deep dive with the stakeholders. You mentioned planning board, you mentioned the downtown partnership and the existing tenants there, but I think it's really important to try to get underneath the mood within those organizations in terms of what they want. So I think this touches on a number of different things. There's some historical value to the way things look right now. Maybe people are concerned about that. I think there's concern about retail, and I wonder if that wouldn't be a focus of what you worked on too, like the current state of retail, its future, what works, what doesn't, right? So I think that's a key component of what could be a right mix of uses within those areas. And maybe those conversations need to be carefully managed with the existing landlords there in terms of the way this is worded, and it's fine, but understanding why they are not redeveloping. A more sensitive approach to that in terms of, you know, what's your vision for the future? Are you happy with what's going on here? You know, where do you see this, you know, the future of this in 5 or 10 years, and how come, you know, and then kind of ferreting it out in a non-judgmental way, if I can say it
Right,
that way.
right. Yeah, I will work on that language.
It was fine, but it just struck me as, you know, there may be some recalcitrance there to begin with, so anything we can do to assuage that would be good, I think. And then you touched on it too in terms of other case studies. You know, the closer those case studies could be to reflect the fundamentals of Franklin. Demographics, size, economics, so forth, even age and history of the town, I think would be important components to think about. because I think they all factor into people's desire for what happens. And maybe overarching all of that is, I don't even know if it's a science, but it's certainly an art or a craft of change management, right? What can you share? What have you learned? What applies to urban development in terms of core change management principles? Because I think that's really critical, no matter what we do, big or small, kind of getting an understanding and leveraging the expertise that you have and the effort that the students are going to put forward with that emphasis. Because no matter what we devise, if we don't have a good handle on how to manage that change process,
Right.
then I think we're going to be stuck really quickly.
Okay.
I'm really excited about it. I think it's a wonderful opportunity for us. It's going to be great for you and for the
It's
students.
great for the
So
students as well.
I think I'm really looking forward to it. And maybe we asked you this last time, but I just don't recall. How many students will be involved?
There, I was saying to Michael, there are 6 registered now. We were hoping for more.
Okay.
I have no idea whether we'll get them or not. But there should be more than that that are in the position where they should be taking this course, so.
I love small teams. I mean, small teams can be
6
very
is fine with
powerful,
me,
yeah.
but I was sort of counting on 10, only because I could deploy them
Right.
more broadly.
No, I think that's great, and of course, overlaying all of it as well is just economics and costs, right? Both from the town's perspective and from individual investment perspective, and any data that you have on proven ROI methodologies to kind of help us make good decisions in terms of where dollars should be spent and what we should do.
Okay.
And I'll throw it in there because it seems to be the topic of the week. A focus on parking. That always comes up. It's always an issue. It's always a concern for folks. So any science or metrics or analysis that you have around parking behaviors, what we can do, what makes sense, what are the trade-offs between accessibility and not.
Yeah, there's plenty of information on that.
Okay, great. That's it for me.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Well, unfortunately, I wasn't here last time you were here, so I'm going to ask some questions that actually I never saw the meeting or got the note minutes from the last one, so I may be asking some redundant questions.
I did answer the questions. I'm not at the last meeting
Right.
because you weren't here, but I answered them in
Well,
writing.
maybe I'll have a different question. I did see that you put the map in there, kind of the purple area of what the focus will be. I didn't know if it should potentially also include the Davis Thayer parcel in that project, because it was one of the documents you were gonna
Yep.
look at,
Yep.
so I didn't know if
Yep.
partial 213, while
Yep.
it's not contiguous and Dean's parcel is in between there, I didn't know if we could look at that parcel as part of that piece, and I'm kind of looking at Jeff and Marina, is that, would you consider that
Yep.
is that too big of a scope?
No,
to add that parcel?
I did that, added that in general task 1. I added others, for example, the Davis Taylor School reuse parcel, so.
Yeah, so I just didn't know, I don't want to make it too big, but I just didn't know, kind of looking for your guys' guidance.
I mean, the only thing I'll say about Davis Thayer, I think it would be great for them to look at it. I think even looking at the Dean College entryway into, the town, if you will, I think as Jack has seen, and you drive up, if you drive up 140 and all of a sudden you get there, Dean College on your right, Davis Thayer on your left, you're kind
Right.
of entering downtown. The difficulty is we can walk and chew gum at the same time, but y'all are gonna start having conversations about what to do with that parcel, the police
Right.
station issue, throughout the fall. So, it's another opportunity, I think, for the students to watch some of the council meetings and hear what the public feedback may or may not be
Right.
on whatever you decide to do with that parcel, right?
Correct,
So,
and I only bring it up only because you may say zig and we may say zag, and we may go, well, what, we should have actually zigged on that. So maybe you come back with your group comes back with a completely different view, that if you actually did that on that piece of land as the gateway to downtown, and you did that on it, it would have a bigger impact on what happens downtown, and we were thinking, well, we're gonna put a park there. Okay, well, that doesn't, so.
Yep,
I
understand.
just thought that may be maybe a purple section in here. before I even started, as Counselor Moore and John, I think all the counselors here said, I mean, to me, this is a win-win for everybody. It's a win-win, it's a win for your students. They get a real-life, practical experience. That's what I'm hoping they want to do for their careers. And for us, we're getting something that normally if we had sourced it out, it would cost tens of thousands of dollars to do. So to me, this is a win-win for both parties. With that being said, I did want to ask about, with the course starting in September, and obviously wrapping up around December, there's a lot of stuff that has to happen in that timeframe. So I'm assuming that a lot of that engagement with the property owners and the community is going to happen probably in that September, early October timeframe, so you can kind of marinate this stuff over the remaining 6 or 8
Right.
weeks of the course.
Right, we talked last time about this is actually a 2-semester course.
Okay,
And
it's gonna
then
be
my
2.
question to the subcommittee was, were you interested in that? And I think the answer was yes.
Okay.
So that allows us a little bit more flexibility of
Okay.
what we're going to do and when we're going to do it. But our first task as a class will be to go through all the existing material. Now, that will give us enough of a foundation to then go out into the community and to do, whether we do a survey or whether we do some focus groups or whether we do public meetings.
Yeah.
That will occur during that period of time. We'll need to do it ending a week or two before Thanksgiving, I think, and probably mid-October,
Okay.
something like that.
Okay.
That was a question I had too. My assumption and recommendation, which I'm sure you agree on, is everything that we do that's going to bring in anyone else, whether it's other town officials or the community or business people, you really need to see that before we do it. You know, kind of like just some of the language might be off-putting or something like that.
I'm not too worried about them.
But my take is that, so that will be a process as well. You know, if we develop a survey, you need to see that survey, and you need to approve that survey before it goes out, or somebody needs to look at it. And my guess is if we do any focus groups, you need to be aware of that. You need to know who it is that we're talking to. You may be actually giving us the names of the people to talk about in the first place. But so there's a process involved there where we'll have some back and forth, which is going to take a bit of time.
Yeah.
So I'll try to get that up and running as quickly as possible so that all those things can happen in the time that we're
I
talking
think
about.
that's probably really important, is to kind of, as with any project, kind of plan those out as far out as possible to give as much time as possible for either
Yeah.
community members or business owners to clear their schedule to be there. The worst thing that can happen is, we're gonna have a meeting next week. We're going, no, it's next week. I need more than a week. So obviously, the sooner that we can get that plan.
And I assume that everything that we do will be under the auspices of the subcommittee. In other words, if we hold a meeting, it's your committee that's holding the meeting.
Correct.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, to give it the
And
validation.
I'm sure we'll do our best efforts as committee members to be there and listen to it, as whether it's one or all, we'll be there. I'm sure Marina will be involved as well. So that'll be wonderful. As it relates to the examples, I'm sure you already have, I'm assuming, you may already have 3 to 4 or 5 examples already mapped out. If I was to say, can you name 2 of them, can you name 2 of them tonight? If you were to say, these are gonna be, we're gonna look at the town of as a starting point.
Yep, I think only because I'm familiar with Westwood, that will be one, and I'll have good access to materials and so forth, and I was involved in it, so I understand it well. There was another one, and I'm not sure I have my notes. I've got a series of folders of the communities that I was looking at. I think Belmont was one, possibly Andover is another one. I happened to be in Petaluma last week, and that's a fascinating community that, as I looked into it, had exactly the same issues that you're talking about. Vacancies in the storefronts and the idea that they really needed to be engaged with the business community in order to do it. Now, the community is slightly different. It's I think, gauging from the type of retail that was there, I think they do rely on tour or visitors more than Franklin might. So that's different, but as they were explaining to me what the issues were, I said, oh, that sounds really familiar. And they have quite historic amount of historic resources there. They have, and if you're a planning student, Petaluma in the 1970s was one of the communities in the country that did two things. They instituted a growth management kind of program where they only allowed 500 building permits to be issued each year. And it had to be tied to what the master plan suggested those areas should be and the type of development it should be. They put an urban growth boundary around the town and stuff like that. So in terms of a community that's willing to sort of press ahead with some strategies that really aren't normally employed, it's kind of an interesting example to take a look at the thought process that went into deciding that that was something that they wanted to get engaged in. There was a survey that was done by a planner just recently. I saw it, and what he did was sent a survey to, I think, about 20 communities in the greater Boston area, asking what they were doing about economic development, whether they had economic development staff, whether they had a program, and whether whether they're using taxation, regulatory, and all that kind of stuff. And I'll share that with you as we go along as well. So that survey I'm probably going to pick some communities off of that as well, because there were some good ones that said, we've been at this for a while, and this is the kind of things that we managed to accomplish. So I'll fill you in as I pick those communities, even before we do the case studies, just to let you know what we're looking at.
Right. And the last thing that excited me was you did put in verbiage, and Councilmember Angelo is the, forget those are there, apologize. And I'm surprised Steve hasn't reminded us of that.
I just heard from someone, I was like,
Oh,
can
did
you hear
you?
them? They're not
Oh.
on mic. No,
Okay,
let's go.
well, that was on us, I apologize for that. Was the potential expansion beyond just what we talked about around the purple area? Let's do this first and see
Yeah.
where it goes,
Yeah.
and if in 2027, in the fall, there's another opportunity, well, then we'll leverage that. But I think, I saw that and I was like, oh, this is great. If this works out, we got the crossing district, we got commercial 2, this.
We'll keep you busy.
Right, we'll keep you busy. We can keep your classes busy for a while. So I thought that was a great thing to note in here. And I see, Max, you have
Yeah,
an
no,
additional
I just want to
question.
say, as someone who's neurodiverse and on the autistic spectrum and active in town government, if you have any students who are neurodiverse or on the spectrum, I'd be happy to mentor them if that's ever comes up. So thank you.
Thank you. So
Go ahead, you go.
I was going, in terms of first contact with the subcommittee, I was thinking that it would be best if we had a couple of classes where we're sort of getting grounded, and then have them meet with you. Now, I'm imagining that our class is on Thursdays, you meet on Tuesdays. I don't think that'll be an issue, but I think it'll probably be virtual if that's possible, is to arrange.
Okay.
So in other words, we would come into this meeting on a virtual basis, so that you would at least see the students, and they
Yep.
would, by that point, be capable of asking you some probing questions,
Fine.
or engaging with you at least, so that you'd be able to see who you're dealing with.
And you said the night of the day of your class is, what day is the
It's
class?
on Thursdays.
It's on Thursday,
So we
okay.
start on the 10th, so I
Okay.
was thinking, so the week of our class is the 24th. Your meeting, I don't know, do you have a meeting date on the?
What's our September schedule looking like right now?
I think you have two meetings, the September 17th, September 30th. September 17th is the permitting 101 workshop
Yeah.
with the planning board, ZBA, and conservation. They're gonna bring with them suggestions on bylaw changes. And then the 30th is dependent on our conversation in a couple weeks
Yep.
about other
But that may be a
zoning.
good
Yeah.
meeting to
Okay.
tag you into.
That'll be
what's
the
on
one
that.
then. All right, we don't need a great deal of time. The idea here would be that you
Yeah.
should be meeting with them.
Yep.
Now, if they can come, then we'll come, but I haven't
That's
met with
fine.
them yet, so I
Virtual
don't
is
know
fine.
what their flexibility is
Yeah.
going to be.
I mean,
All right, so that's good. We've
And did you say the classes were Thursday evening?
yeah.
Okay. So we thought-
before we drop this subject, did Jamie or Marina, did you have anything else you wanted to add? Is it looking good for you guys?
Yeah.
I mean,
Sorry, just so I can be helpful to you, Steve. Yeah, no, we're really excited to work with the professor. Really looking forward to see what new ideas and new perspectives they bring, and hopefully we can get some balls moving once we get their recommendations and their perspectives.
Yeah, the only last comment I'll have in it is that we talk about kind of the development of downtown and reaching out to the business community and the property owners down there. But I also think and you're gonna hear it on Monday. Obviously, the community's gonna have input as to size, look, and everything else. So even before the class starts, those 6 people are signed up. Tell them to sign in on Monday and watch the show, because it's going to be, you're definitely going to get community feedback from that. It's important feedback. So that'll be a good starting point. And actually, it kind of worked out. It's like the chicken or the egg. It's good that we actually have someone who's put forth a proposal, because now we'll kind of see how that process is going to work its way through, whether it gets approved or not, but you'll see which direction it goes and where the input's coming from at that. So
I wrote that down, but what's the date of that meeting?
So it's next,
Actually, the applicant just withdrew his application and resubmitted it because he needed to do an administrative change. So the hearing will actually be on August 24th,
so
not
that
on
moved,
Monday.
okay.
Yes, but there is the design review meeting will still be on August 18th, but the planning board meeting will be on the 24th.
The design review meeting,
Is on August 18th.
is it televised?
Yes.
And everything's hybrid, Jack.
Yeah.
So everything's via Zoom. Almost, I think every board we have does everything hybrid via Zoom, call in, YouTube, or in person. So whatever's most helpful for anybody, the students or yourself, you can Zoom in as well.
and this project has already come to the design review board about a week and a half ago already. And
A
that
little
meeting
over
is
2 weeks ago.
online
Yes.
right now, so you can see that meeting.
Yeah,
online.
so our design review meetings aren't actually televised, but Steve did post the last meeting, and I assume we'll post this next one. But, yeah, but you can also, design review, yeah. But we can also send you there is a Zoom link, so you could watch online. Yeah, yeah.
Not that one, gotta look at the
Yeah.
other meetings. I had asked who the point of contact was going to be, and Marina suggested it would be her, because there'll be a lot of questions that just to get us underway, who talked to you. Yeah.
I
We don't have to go
1,000
into it.
support that. Couldn't get more support out of me than that. Really quickly, Jack, between September and December, are there other meetings, as I lay out, their fall is a lot. Do you anticipate like once a month being before the subcommittee, or do you want me to kind of hold one of the meetings each month through December? Does that be September, might be a couple meetings, or one, then October, November, December? What interval do you think would be
Yeah, I
helpful?
think that would be fine, because
Okay.
I did have in my notes that it's important that we check in just so that everybody knows that everything is moving along, and nothing falls off the table. So I don't know, Jamie, to answer that question, what the best schedule would be, but something like that would be fine, if it's possible to do that.
Absolutely, yep, absolutely.
Perfect. Any questions of anybody out there? I don't see anybody on Zoom.
Roberta.
Oh, Roberta? Oh, Roberta's got her hands
Hold
up.
on
There
one
she is.
second.
Yep. Is she ready to go?
She should be now.
All right, Roberta?
She's just got on mute.
Oh,
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
we can.
Great. Thanks so much. I just want to commend all of you. This is a fabulous plan. 25 years on the partnership, we've been trying desperately to get things moving, and it sounds like we have finally arrived. I'm very excited about this. I want to offer that if the students and/or professor would like to come to any of the partnership meetings to talk to the business community, we usually get about 40 people at those general meetings. We would be happy to host them. And in the meantime, anything we can do to help move this along, we are happy to do that and be there. I really think this is going to work this time. I just have a really good feeling about it. So hoping that will happen. The other comment, and to your point, Mr. LeBlanc, is that with the also development of the crossing section, one thing can feed off the other. And I'm hopeful that once that gets going, that the downtown will sort of feed off of that. So I think there's lots of opportunity here, and I think this is a great way to proceed. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Roberta. Appreciate that. Any other questions, comments?
I was just going to comment that it sounds like the new timing of the project actually might work better for your students, since
Yeah.
it'll be closer to when class starts and you might have more students.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah,
I
that
will,
sounds great.
I will alert them that there's planning board meetings, so they'll do it.
Also, could we look into moving a meeting to a Thursday if that works better? I mean, I don't think we are locked into Tuesday nights, are we? So
Nope.
if there's a.
This was just like kind of polling
Correct.
people when they
Yeah.
were available
Yeah.
on vacations and stuff, but Thursday nights are totally fine.
Yeah.
As
So-
long as it works out for all of you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. So if there's a time when you're like, hey, we'd love to talk to you guys, but my students just aren't available on Tuesday nights,
Yeah.
maybe we can make that happen.
And the class meets from what time on Thursdays typically?
5:30 to 8:30.
Okay, well, if we can time it on a
That's good
Thursday
timing.
at 6, they don't even have to, they can be part of their class time, so
Okay. All right.
we'll find a way to make it work for you all.
Okay, and I'll get back to you right away once I meet with the students and
Okay.
find out what their flexibility is.
That'll be wonderful. Thank you. Again, thank you very much for you and your class and UMass Boston for taking this up. I'm glad I reached out and was able to make this happen, so.
I am too.
Perfect, awesome, thank you.
Thank
Appreciate
you
it.
all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next up, discussion of the friendly 40B policy. So if you all remember, back in January, we voted on the policy, but we also put a stipulation in there that the policy would come back around in January. So this is our first attempt at looking at some changes to it, and I've asked Councilor Morangello to, as I like to say, put a straw model out there. This is not the final product, but this is, we got to start someplace. Hasn't been prepared by Max, shared it with me a little bit. You guys saw it. Not anybody in the town administration has seen it yet. This is certainly a beginning, and so that's where we stand. So with that, I'm going to actually turn it over to Max or Councilor Morangello to get us teed up and get us grounded a little bit.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I guess, first off, we had the first policy. We had, in terms of friendly 40Bs, we would prohibit rental units with over 20 units from advancing to the council. And, I think there was, a lot of feedback that people wanted that policy, and I think, we have to show we listen to them. But at the same time, there's a big risk that if we accept no projects at all, we could be below our 10% threshold. Because what happens is you have units that are not affordable housing that are being built because they're allowed under regular zoning. And as more of those units are built, they end up under the denominator. And the more you expand the denominator, the lower your percentage goes. So if we do keep this current policy as it is, there's a danger that we can lose all of our leverage that we have with developers to get something that works for the town. If we drop below 10%, we no longer have control. They could go to the ZBA, they could go to the state, and they have different language they could use that makes it less advantageous to the town. So I thought, if we're not negotiating around, I think, unit size is an important factor. Ownership, whether it's renter or owner occupied, is an important factor. But what other factors should we look at? Should we look at traffic? Everyone talks about traffic. Should that be a factor we look at? Should we look at those real, true affordable units? Those 30% of the AMI or the 50%, rather than just things that people say are not really truly affordable. So I've included 9 factors in this policy, and the goal is if the developer wants to advance to the council, they have to choose 3 of them and meet the threshold for that. And so some of the factors that I include traffic, environmental sustainability, unit accessibility for people with disabilities, proximity to transit, funding for infrastructure improvements, the total effect of the development on the town's operating budget, and whether, like I said, it contains units that are truly affordable. And this is just a starting point. So we could, I had some other ones that are further down in the packet that I took out just because I think the chair, Chair LeBlanc wanted it to be more concise. But if we want to add them in, we can. If we want to add other things in, we can. If we want to take stuff out, we can. And I also included a glossary just to explain what some of these acronyms are, and because some of them can be kind of confusing. With that, there's different. I could go down the proposal. The first thing is a resolution, which says, okay, we're going to take the old one and then we're going to repeal it and replace it with the current Exhibit 1. And if we don't do anything by January, then it just disappears. So nothing happens. But the first one is the. So this is sort of pulled. This language up here for Exhibit 1 is pulled from the original document that the town administrator used for the first policy that we had. So it's very similar to that. The thing is, I did change the sunset clause to 4 years, and we could change it back to 1. We could get rid of it. It's up to you. And then for the checklist for developers, it includes the same checklist that the previous one did with regards to project name and all that other stuff. Criteria for review is all the same. I did, and you notice that, so then it goes down to the self-assessment. And like I said, there's 9 criteria. There's the ownership. So for each of these things, you get a point. And you need 3 points to advance. So ownership structure, units must be owner-occupied, primary residence rather than investor owns rental properties. So that's something the council supports. If the developer wants to advance, they might be incentivized to check that off. Same thing for number 2. The project must contain no more than 20 units total. So if it's too big, they don't get that check mark. Sustainability, this is a little more complicated. So in regards to, right now we have just the regular stretch code, but if the opt-in stretch code is more conserves more energy. So if we just have the regular stretch code, and you want to build, you have to do the specialized stretch code. If Franklin decides later we do want to do the specialized stretch code, then you still have to be more energy efficient. You can't just get a free pass. Whether it's near transit, so whether it's near the commuter rail, we want people to, instead of going and putting their cars on the roads, we want them to take the train to Boston, or take a commuter, and that way by locating development towards the commuter rail or Forge Park, either Forge Park or Downtown Crossing, we're diverting some of that traffic so it doesn't go onto our roads. Traffic impact management, and this can be a little flexible, but basically it says, traffic can't increase more than 5 seconds. We can change it to 10, we can make it 0. I think there needs to be a little wiggle room for the developer, because, but I think the goal is we don't want, it to slow down by a minute when you drive down a, development. Infrastructure improvements, we're saying they have to dedicate a certain percentage of the revenue from the project building, not the land, but the building, to infrastructure improvements. So it could be utilities, stormwater systems, parks, public transit, traffic and roadway. The thing is there's a marginal, the developer's profit margin is going to be bigger for bigger buildings. So we're asking them to dedicate a bigger percentage of the infrastructure if it's a bigger building, because it has to make sense for them. Ultimately, we want to make sure that we have a building that makes financial sense for the developer, but also makes sense for the town. Accessibility, this is a big issue. A lot of people don't have buildings that, people who are older, they can't get into the bathtub, So we want to increase the amount of units that meet ADA accessible standards. And so we might change some of the language around this, but the point is that we want 15% of the total units to be fully accessible. They have all that, they can live in it without any, extra help. The next one is deep affordability. That's what we talk about, stuff not being truly affordable. We want to have stuff that's meets those lower income thresholds, and it's harder for the developers to meet them. So they're gonna be for less units, or more units, like 1 for every 40, or 2 units for every 21 to 40, or 1 to every 1 to 20 for the 50%. So basically, it's expensive. Basically what's happening with affordable housing is the units that are market rate are subsidizing the cheaper, affordable ones. So if you make them even more affordable, they have to subsidize it even more. So it has to be fair to the developer. We also want those people to be able to live there. And then that positive fiscal impact to the town. You know, I've heard people say, well, you know, people are gonna, you know, this is gonna have extra children that's gonna go to the school, or, you know, this is gonna impact our roads, or this is gonna impact our water. We need to be able to prove, the developer needs to be able to show and have evidence that, this is gonna benefit the town. We could, as a council, could point to that and say, look, this is actually benefiting the town. It's not costing us students for, you know, that we have to educate. This is actually helping the town. And so if it meets of those 3 of those 9, it advances to the council, and we can say, hey, we still don't want it. We don't want to build another building, or this project isn't right for us. We still have the final say. This is lower. This is the threshold for which they advance. And this other stuff with the review process is pretty similar to, I believe, is pretty similar to what was there before. And then we just have a glossary of all the terms and definitions, just for your reference. Like what all these, you know, as well as have some criteria that we aren't used. They include open space preservation. You know, we could give Franklin residents and employees a preference. We could give. We've talked a little bit about first time home buyers. But one thing I'm personally and particularly interested in is first generation home buyers, where their parents haven't been able to own a home. And by doing that, we improve social mobility. And the other thing, the seniors and veterans, as well as interest-based affinity groups. And one of the examples of that is Pride in Hyde Park, which is an LGBTQ community that's affordable housing in Hyde Park. But it doesn't have to be LGBTQ. It could be people who like the Patriots, or people who like Star Trek, or people who like have dogs and like pets. But like I said, if you want to add those in, we can. If we want to take other things out, we can. So that's all I have, and I'm happy to take any questions. And this is just a rough draft, and admin hasn't looked over it. If there's anything that's not feasible, we can take it out, toughen up the language, and make sure it can be implemented properly. But this is sort of, I think, you know, is something that could be financially viable for developers without sort of throwing out the baby with the bathwater and saying, no, we can't, you know, preventing all building that's big and, you know, bigger and substantial. Because I think there might be some projects that it might be transit-oriented, or you know, that, you know, help our seniors that, you know, still might be worth doing, even if they're rental units that are more than 20 units. So with that, I'll yield.
So with that, I'm going to ask Councilor Malloy, do you have questions, comments, thoughts?
I do, all of them.
Okay,
All of
fire
those.
away. He's there to answer.
So good, thanks for taking a shot at this. I guess if I had to roll this back to 30,000 feet, what is the objective that you're trying to achieve here?
I think the objective is, how do we be flexible enough to support the objectives of the town in more detail, while also making sure we get units that are affordable and make sense for people who need them.
So trying to grow the number of affordable units
I think so. I think
through 40B, through a friendly 40B,
yeah,
right?
to
Because
a
there's
point,
other avenues to do
yeah.
that now. Yeah.
And to a point where we won't, you know, go below our threshold. You know, that's the scary part. But I would, you know, I'd be happy to grow it further than that. But I just don't know if that's what the council wants.
I just want to make sure I understood the kind of impetus behind this,
Yeah.
because I know we had a lot of debate in January when we passed the existing resolution, so I just want to kind of hone in on that. Because as we have it now, I think we said we would not agree to a LIP, locally initiated program,
Yes.
as part of a friendly 40B for large, more than 20 rentals, right?
That's correct.
Not condos, not townhouses. So we have some flexibility now for other types of projects. We just didn't want the over 20 rentals through 40B.
Right. And so this would still be, those would still be criteria. It would still be, if the developer doesn't meet those, it would be harder for them to do the other things on here. I mean, it would be, they'd have to check off 3 boxes that are not those boxes.
Well, it's more discussion, obviously, and then that's the other point I wanted to clarify. So if somebody wanted to put in a 500 units apartment complex and they met 3 of these criteria, I think you just mentioned that the council would still retain the ability to say no for other reasons.
Yes.
So I just want to make sure you didn't envision that as long as they hit 3 of the 9, that the
It's not automatic. They would have,
council would have to be.
Council would still have the final say.
So somebody could hit all 9 and the council could say, I don't want this project, it's too big, it's too this, it's too that.
Correct.
Okay. So I just want to kind of get the sense of what that was all about. Yeah, again, it's worth kind of discussing. I think what we need to clarify is, what's the objective around affordable units and how best to get them. This may be one way to do it. I don't know if there's other ways to kind of look at it. We look at the Depot project, there's 10% affordable housing there. And I think that's by the good graces of the developer, right? Is there any requirement?
I don't have the details on that, but
I don't know that he's compelled to do that at all, right?
It's MBTA communities.
Okay, under MBTA.
The zoning allows is the 10% through MBTA communities.
So it's 10% there versus, say, 25 if that were a friendly 40B.
Right.
So it's
Correct.
fewer there. Right. And then I guess in time, we'll get an updated, subsidized housing index number, right? I don't know if it's changed that much since January, but.
No, it's probably changed a little. Probably not an enormous amount. I mean, Marina has been working on a presentation on SHI, trying to kind of gear up for later this fall or going into the discussion on this.
Right.
Maybe some other zoning changes. Trying to give people an update based on the market rate units that have come on board. Has that number shifted a little? There's some affordables, I think, that are coming online down the street here on the left-hand side across from Honeydew. And then obviously Franklin Ridge will hopefully come online, a year from now. But we hope to give an update, later on this fall about
Okay,
where
yeah,
we stand.
just-
But it's gonna be 10.5 to 11.2%, somewhere in that range. You also obviously have a couple of permitted projects that are gonna keep you well over that 10% for a little while at Grove Street, Franklin Ridge, a few affordables down here. The Habitat House will go on to the SHI probably soon. Is there anything I can think, am I forgetting? Well, St. John's, my apologies, yeah. Obviously, there's other projects either in appeal or in legal status or St. John's. There are other projects that we don't know where those stand. I was just mentioning the 3 or 4 qualifying projects that we know are already built, getting
Right.
occupancy, that'll get added to the rolls at some point this calendar year, I'm sure.
Yep.
Like the Habitat House will get added on the next roll. So I was just saying the ones that we know are being built. In the case of Franklin Ridge, we obviously have some level of control over that, so.
Right.
And those will be 100% affordable. All 60 will be affordable. So, we hope to try to paint, is the threat coming quicker than we think?
That's my question, yeah, exactly.
And so we're gonna try to get that out to the EDC probably, and it's probably gonna be one of those meetings that's getting, with UMass and I know there's gonna be at some point a bunch of zoning proposal, so that probably later this fall, I would imagine we'll have an update on where the SHI is. And how close we are to getting under the 10%.
Be good to know, because it kind of factors in directly into what we're trying to achieve here, where you want to kind of drive this.
Really quickly, I will almost guarantee you that if you go below 10, this is not what developers are gonna do. Right? So, we do have to be concerned a little bit, and I think our number is strong, but, a developer can challenge the percentage rate when they file for a project, right? If they think we're below 10, they can challenge it to the state and try to get a new rendering. I mean, I don't think that that's gonna happen anytime soon, but, if they did do that and somehow we were under 10. Medfield, by the way, in their November statistic, when we were at 11.05, Medfield was 9.92, which, if I were the town manager there, I'd say round up. When did we ever not learn a math that 9.92 has to stay specific? When does that not get rounded up, right? But I think the state does play that position every once in a while.
Well, it'd be good to know, and it sounds like we'll know in a reasonably short period of time kind of what that new number
Probably
is,
the next
which
few
would help us define what the target should be, And then we can kind of discuss what we want to do with this policy if it does have that kind of impact. And then we, obviously we'll know how many more units are coming on and what other rental units are coming on, and we can kind of think through it. And again, comparing this to what we had voted on in January, I think that was designed to kind of assuage concerns around more huge development, which I still think is an issue for a lot of people. But it's time to kind of think through that and talk about what makes sense. So we also need the growth and development too, right? So, thank you.
Okay. Counselor Cribb?
All right, I have some thoughts. First of all, I want to say I think this is really well thought out, really just very detailed. I really appreciate that you made the point that, like, hey, just checking the box does not actually satisfy it. Here are the things that you have to provide in order to satisfy it, to kind of get ahead of that. I did notice that, with the number 9 criteria, the net positive fiscal impact, that being a criteria sort of implies that, like, something that could be really negative fiscal impact could still get through, right? And so we could end up in a much worse position. I almost feel like
If
that's...
it's not checked.
If it's not
Everything's
checked, right,
done.
yeah, they check 3 other things. We're saying, hey, this could be a real problem for the town, a real financial problem for the town, but it could still make it through, which I thought was, an interesting point of this. I would want to see that, like, we're getting close to net positive, if not certainly net positive. But I loved that you included accessibility, and I especially love that you included deep affordability, because that is something that we have struggled with. Franklin's, where the part of the population that is struggling to get housing, they are not at that 80% of median income. They are 70 and below, and that's where we're not able to get anything because people are putting them in at 80. So I love that you have the deep affordability here. I do, to Steve's point, we have this, right now we are looking at smaller rentals, or it could be larger if it's homeowners. And I wonder if maybe there's a way to make those weightier in this, where it's like, okay, there's, it's 3 things, but as long as one of them is one of those 2 items, or you have to check off 4 boxes, or even 5, like, just to emphasize that, hey, what we want is smaller rentals or home ownership. I will say, though, that of course the rentals are going to increase our number for the index, because every rental unit counts. If there's a 50 home condo and there's 10 of them are affordable, we get 10 units. If there's a 50 rental unit, we get 50. So I do realize that there's a balance there in trying to make sure we stay above that number. Then rentals help more. But again, we are not. We have heard that the large rentals are what people keep pushing back on, and that is not necessarily the future that people want for Franklin, is huge rental apartments. So I also want to reiterate that, again, and I think we've all mentioned this, but saying this again here, is that even if we say, okay, it's 3 check boxes and it comes to the town council, it is not a presumption of support, correct? It is just, it comes to us for discussion, for a vote. It's just allowing it to do that, not assuming that it's going to get approved by the council. Yeah, so I guess my only other concern with this, like, there's 9 and they just need 3, is whether there are 3 that could be easier for them to meet, and then they, it's, a big financial burden for the town. It messes up traffic, and it's huge. But at the same time, it's close to a train station, and it checks off. They have, ADA accessible things and one more. But we end up with a much larger problem than maybe what we had anticipated. So I do wonder if some of these should be weighted more heavily, like I said, you know, if we did that for the size of rentals, rental development or home ownership. So those are my thoughts in going over this, but I do really appreciate that. I think you made a really, really thoughtful, intentional first draft of a policy here, and I think it's a really good place to start. And I definitely think that, you know, with some tweaks, whether or not, you know, we are for it, I think it's certainly worth bringing to the council for discussion on kind of being that next step once the one that we have is up for review. So thank you for doing that.
Alrighty, my turn. So I agree that this is a really good starting point, and I agree with what Councilor Griffith said. While check off the box, maybe we weight these differently. Like we say ownership is worth 3 points, and it's now trying to get to a score. And it's something I talked with Councilor Morangello. Do you have to choose something from this group and something from this group? And so, because, I mean, some of these things I look at when it talks about sustainability, that's great from a cost standpoint for the owner of the house, and it's more efficient, yada, 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 but it costs more money. But what does it do for the town? Doesn't, to be honest with you, I don't get anything whether or not you're insulated well or not. I mean, from a town, selfishly from a town perspective. But I do think it's, there may be a weighting that we can do here, or to your point, you gotta pick either or. It's gonna be owner or less than 20 or something like that. I think that, I did have a question on the infrastructure improvements. Is that, do you look at that as the equivalent of, and I hate to, in some ways I think the best way to do this is also attach it to maybe projects that have been done, like 444 East Central or the proposed Washington Street project, to see how they would check off these boxes here. Where I'm going with the infrastructure, do you look at that as the equivalent of what they did at the last meeting, which was to add mitigation expenses in there? Is that really the mitigation effort that you're referencing in that infrastructure improvement kind of thing?
Yeah, so it doesn't have to be, but there's two things. First, two things to note. First is that the transit, the traffic count, that has, if you spend money to improve your traffic mitigation, so that it impacts that traffic. It can't be counted twice.
Okay.
So it can only be counted for traffic, or it can be counted for the, if you have public infrastructure, public space, if you support the Gatra bus, if you support water pipe improvements. So it can be transit, but it doesn't have to be. But if you do it for transit, you can't count it for both things.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Because when I looked at that and kind of, and again, this is just this, as I've said before, this is a good stake in the sand, and we're gonna move it left or right. Because I think that one of the best things for us to do is to try and apply these criteria against, I hate to say it, the 440 East Central and the Washington Street project. We know where 440 kind of ended up, and we can see what boxes it checked here, because I'll use the infrastructure improvement. Under what you propose here, it would cap out at $500,000. They actually paid $750,000. And in fact, that'd be something that I'd be looking for is, when it comes to mitigation, there are obviously a lot of areas that, quite frankly, if they paid us $3 million, we'd be mitigating a lot of things. We'd be taking care of a lot of traffic and stuff. So I don't know if they're necessarily capped, but I think it'd be good to put this against whether it was even a 40B project or another project, and say, well, if that was a 40B, what would it have done? Would it have created a net positive use across the street? Would that have created a net positive impact? I don't know the answer to that question, but I do think this is a great starting point, and I think obviously it's here with us because I looked at our role to kind of ferret this out, so when we deliver it to the council, hopefully sometime around Thanksgiving, that we've ironed out kind of the calculation, how we're gonna do this. But I like the concept, you get to choose, but I do agree maybe we have to weight things different, because to me, I would consider someone building a owner-occupied property gets a heck of a lot more than a rental property. And I think the reason why you put this together is right now the proposal is kind of limiting us to 20, no more than 20 And as everyone has heard me proclaim, we do need development. It needs to be sensible development. And I am certainly for affordable housing. I would love, and I'm going to use the small A affordable, not the big A affordable, which is an average person who can buy a $500,000 home in Franklin. It just doesn't exist today. I wish we had those kind of homes in Franklin. But if we can get it a different way, through the capital A, that's wonderful as well. So I do think this is a starting point. I think the only other thing that I'm looking for in this, and you kind of addressed it, and I'm gonna rely on, and in some ways when we have our session in September, we can talk about this, is the process, the review process from start to finish. And again, I'm gonna leverage 444 East Central. That thing took forever to get through. I wish a lot of those items were ironed out well before it kind of came. Even that mitigation discussion happened on the last day. It was like a rush to get it in, and I wish that stuff was kind of ironed out well earlier in the process. I know it's hard to put a number to things, like if you build a 300 unit thing, you're gonna have to pay $20,000 per unit, and that becomes a multiplier. That's the mitigation, kind of ties to what you're pointing out. But, because each is different, because that one, I remember they were talking about how it was gonna impact the pump station. They didn't know, they still don't know. In fact, they're gonna have to pump, when they pump, it's gonna be off hours to make it work. They can't pump it during the prime time. So if you have a big rain, and it's raining at night, that affects it. So we may find out we have to put a $400,000 pump improvement or whatever. My point is, I think that stuff, that was always one of my biggest beef was the process and how it takes long. And that's really one of the reasons why we're gonna talk about that in September, is how do we, I know the process is we do better than others, Jamie, so we're better than a lot of other communities. But from an outsider who's doesn't sit on those boards, it seems like it takes forever. There's a lot of iterations, that's why I'm glad they're gonna be here. And I think part of that discussion is, how do we make this friendly 40B process work a little bit faster so that it doesn't take months to be done. But that, to me, is the goal, is to take what Councilor Morangello's put down here, tweak it a little bit, figure out if there's the right combination, if there's a scoring here. And I think one of the best things for us to do is to take 2 or 3 projects and figure out how those projects would have scored in here. We may need to leverage Marina to help us figure some of that out. But I think that would be a good starting point at this point. But this was a great beginning, and I applaud you. One question for you, Max, is the 9 things you got here, and actually the more, and we can certainly use some of the other ones that we threw off the reservation. Was there a source of these? Did you look at other communities, or this was always baking in your head?
It's always baking in my head.
Okay.
I mean, some of them, I think part of it was with the Franklin, prioritizing residents.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure that, when you accept only residents, the people who are gonna be in those units are gonna be people who look like Franklin residents. And so you're gonna be excluding people who might not look like Franklin residents. And so, so I just wanted to make sure, to counterbalance that, I wanted to have something that would be like the first generation home buyer, so that we have people who haven't had the opportunity to have home ownership, to be able to have home ownership. So so those I kind of paired together, and so I took them out together. I thought interest-based affinity groups, I know Councilor Cormier-Ledger, I thought would like the Hyde Park, the Pride concept, because it's something that I think you would be passionate about. But it's also a way to build community, and that's something we've kind of been struggling with as a town, is having a shared sense of identity. And so by having those kind of projects, it could be bring more to people's lives than just having an apartment. And for the open space, and kind of folded it a little bit into number 6, in that if you invest in open space, it has to be 15% of the area. So it's still kind of stuck in there. But I wanted to condense it, like you said, and so that's sort of where I stuck it in there. But the other thing too is I think it's important to have employees rather than just residents in terms of Franklin, so then they're close to where they work, so they don't have to make as much traffic, as well as they're more tied to the community. So that's the other thing, is I don't want it to be just Franklin residents. Also, if you work in Franklin currently, you might have an air job. So, but I'm happy to, if people have other ideas, like please, like maybe at the next meeting or another meeting, we could amend this, mark it up and say what it should be, workshop it. And if there's stuff you want to take out, we can do that. If you want to waive stuff, I just don't want it to be stricter than the current policy. Because if it's stricter than the current policy, then what's the point? But as long as there's still a pathway for people, to have, as long as you have a lot of public good for the town and for the people of the Franklin, there should still be a pathway if you are a rental property that's more than 20 units for you to get in. As long as it's recent, but the town council would also, like I said, ultimately have the final say for that. So yeah, think about what you want to add, think what to take out. There might be some minor tweaks around, like one of them is town center, it's not defined, we should just take that out and use the MBTA or commuter rail station as instead of the town center, and just take that language out. And then some of the ADA unit is actually not in line with what the state uses, so we'd have to fix that. And I'm still getting feedback from a few people, from a few constituents, and but other than that, I think it's up to the committee as to, this is policy making, this is the nitty gritty, so we really get to decide what kind of Franklin we want to live in, and that's what I want us to do. So.
Jamie, Marina, any questions, comments?
I think the only quick comment I make, to Councilor Morangelo's point, we kind of got it late last week for the packet. I think it's important to Councilor Malloy's point that you iron out what your goal is. Couple notes. One, we haven't had an application in 3 years, so it's not like the current system is appetizing to anybody in town. Number two, I would note the planning board meetings have become so limited, might be the correct word. They're canceling meetings. So I think the EDC also has to think of this from, I'll go 40,000 feet, almost into outer space. What's the reputation, what's the aura, what's this council stand for? I think is an issue that many of you have heard of, I'm sure, in terms of development. So I would encourage Councilor Morangelo to maybe reach out to a few developers, get their feedback in town.
I have.
And because, I think to the question earlier about restrictiveness, from some perspective, people could see this easily as exponentially more restrictive than what you currently have on, right? There's a lot of costs in here that are going to get added to a project. I think all of this stuff in here, these different philosophies, I think they mean well. I think they certainly represent a lot of the feedback that the community's received around priority development, where they want development, some of the issues that have come out about net positivity, fiscal affairs, things of that sort. I think are things that we've all heard during these hearings on development, right? But when you're adding infrastructure money into it, then you go to ZBA, they're going to add mitigation into it. A lot of this process too is costly for a developer, and so you're going to add a lot of expense. Sustainability is a huge expense to a project, as Councilor Blank just said. So I think you have to find out whether the financials of this are realistic for anybody. And I think, and I mean this with all due respect, and I mean this sincerely. I think obviously there was a lot of anti-development sentiment in town. And obviously from a financial perspective, that may not be realistic. And I think holistically we have to, as an EDC, hopefully you guys can decide, like, where are we with development? Are we going to encourage development? Are we going to support growth? Are we going to try to advocate and support projects like Depot Plaza? Or are we going to add additional layers to developers to get in and put their finances and their money on the table to try to build some of the stuff that we want them to build? So I think, just a couple of, that's really like 40 or 50,000 foot feedback. And I don't think I'm speaking out of turn here. I think last year's election was largely about anti-development. And I think that people see that here. And I think we're seeing it at the planning board level. And I think you're going to hear it in September. I mean, they're literally canceling meetings because they have no applications on the docket. I mean, at some point, they're not even going to be having meetings because there's nothing for them to hear because there's nobody filing for anything at all. And that's a reality I think y'all have to talk about in context of this. And I think a lot of people in town view, particularly many new councilors, as people who are anti-development. And so I think Depot Plaza is going to be an interesting development because honestly, if you can't permit a 50-foot building at that location in downtown, I think that sends a message to all of you as policymakers that you may need to rethink all of this stuff from a financial standpoint, because you're just not going to get investment from builders to come in here and build. Like, it's just a reality that we're actually now seeing at the planning board level, where there just isn't anything to hear because no one's filing for anything to build. So I think, to me, that's a little concerning because I think you all have been through the budget and you see where the finances are going. So I think, to Councilor Malloy's point, I think defining a goal and objective here, are you trying to encourage people to use this technique and this tool to build? If so, what are the criteria that will get people to the table to do that? I also think it's important through this process to send a signal through the council, to send a signal to builders or developers or outside developers or even, you know, folks from Boston or whatever, that you're not going to reject something if it comes before the council. I think that's a serious issue that has to be discussed as part of this. And maybe you can take some of my feedback, and Councilor Morangel, think of that, because you're not getting anybody to bite on what's currently the policy, and I sincerely just believe that this is going to add a lot of cost to a developer to kind of go ahead and file something. Even if the issues that you've outlined in here are absolutely accurate, and I think they represent what most people in town are very concerned about. Certainly traffic and infrastructure and cost and net finances, all of these issues in here, and I think we have to find a way to figure out what the right balance of those issues are. Otherwise, I think you're going to spend a lot of time on a policy that nobody's going to take advantage of, right? And I think your time may be better spent, you know, on some other, like for zoning, your time may be just better spent on trying to actually change the rules in the current zoning code to incentivize people to build, right? So, you know, in terms of some of the other issues, I mean, I think, you know, I'm sure if the town attorney went through here, he'd tell you a couple things on, you know, the mitigation, right? The ZBA is going to always have the control over mitigation at a final permitting level when you file a comprehensive permit, you know, and a couple of other things I'm sure they'll comment. Obviously, we'll write the resolution on repealing the old one and whatnot, but, you know, Councilor Morangel, if you want any input, if you want to have a meeting with Marion and myself, Mark, if you want to meet with some of the tech review staff, happy to facilitate that, have a discussion around it too, to try to get some feedback that might be helpful to everybody. So thank you very much.
Hi. I think the only thing I'll add is I agree with what Jamie just said. I'm a little bit concerned that by making it sort of things that you check off, the benefits of a friendly 40B is that it's supposed to be sort of a negotiation between the town and the developer. We don't have to let you do this because we could just claim safe harbor. So let's work it out. Let's try to get to a project that really benefits the community. And by sort of listing these out as you need to check these boxes, it might limit what we could potentially really be seeking. So you might have a project, I'll just give you an example from Somerville. There was a project, they allowed for huge amounts of density, and the developer said, we're going to let you have this big space on the first floor. You're going to be able to do, I think it was $1 a year for the rent with like a 99-year lease for a daycare, which was a community need of affordable daycare that outweighed everything else. So you're getting this one benefit that you know is going to impact a lot of people, but that's just the one benefit, right? So it's not checking off 3 things. So I think if this is and I think this is great. I agree that this is sort of what the community has been saying in the past couple of years about where their priorities are. And I like the idea of putting forth the community's priorities so that when developers do come to us, they sort of know from the get-go, these are the things that we're looking for. But to make it where you have to sort of check off boxes, then I think sort of limits that ability to actually negotiate and to have a conversation and to let the town decide, this one issue outweighs everything else, and so we're going to let you go forth because you're making it a minimum, right? So that would be the only feedback that I've got. I think it's great to put it out as like, these are our ideals, this is what the town of Franklin stands for, and this is what you should be thinking of when you're coming to us with projects, but it doesn't mean, you have to do X. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, actually, my comments would be next steps. I do think, Councilman, it'd be great to sit down with them. I would be more than happy to join you in that conversation. And I think we can tweak it, refine it, and bring it back to this committee. Maybe one or two more times. We can do our prep before and have quick conversations around it. In my personal opinion, you guys can agree or disagree, to sometime around late November, early December, have this fleshed out, because we are under the clock, i.e. sometime mid-January, I think is the clock. So we can somehow refine it and have the discussion, because this would have to go through two readings.
This would just be one reading.
Just one reading.
Yep.
Yeah, so timing-wise, if we can get it done around Thanksgiving, then we got 45 days to slip it into a meeting to get it approved. I agree with everything you've all said. We got to wait. And as you just said, Jamie, there's a lot of no development out there, and you are talking to the exact opposite of that. But I say this I say this every time. It is smart development. It's just not go put up a 70-story building in downtown. It's about where it's going to be and the impact of it. And to Councilor Morangello's point, if someone can help mitigate, it's part of the project, mitigate the impact on that, then we don't know. There's ways to do that. So, and without doing that, I've said this before, everything that we did 2 months ago to get the budget, and we'll probably do the same thing next, it will all go to naught, and we'll be at a different place. So you can't have your cake and eat it too, which is have everything that we do here and do it without additional tax revenue. And I'm trying to find a way to, and I think that's why we're on this committee. You asked the question, what's this committee want? I would hope that you're on the Economic Development Committee because you want to drive development, and that development can be in multiple ways. It can be existing, but it can also be new. So with that, I think those are the next steps, and I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, no, I just want to say that this is very much a compromise policy. My preference is the council would have a deliberation as to whatever came before it, and that we were flexible. But I don't think that the council has the appetite right now to completely ignore the construction of bigger units for rentals. And so this is very much a middle ground. I think that, in terms of the financial viability, I think that this opens the door for more options for developers that currently don't exist under the current policy. So I think that if it was, and I'm willing to, make it more financially accessible for developers, but I just don't know if the rest of the EDC shares that mentality. So it's up to us. It's up to us. I do appreciate the sentiment about flexibility, and I feel like this is more flexible than the status quo. So that'll yield.
Beautiful. Any other comments or questions?
No, sir.
All righty. Next up, climate leader designation goal. So, where do we want to begin with that one? I didn't really prep too much enough for that one, kind of. I'm gonna turf this to you, Council Marangella, because this was.
This is not my goal either.
No.
Oh, no, what is my goal?
It is your
It
goal.
is my goal, but James,
Right.
it is my goal.
I was like,
No,
wait a
it's not my
minute.
goal, it's the
Totally
master
your goal.
plan's goal. It's the master plan's goal.
Well, it was your objective to put it on the agenda tonight.
What's a master plan goal?
That is true, that is true.
So, we've been working trying to, the climate leader designation is the Green Communities Act. We are currently a green community. And the next step of that, in terms of, getting grant money from the state would be to be a climate leader, get climate leader designation. And so there's grant funding associated with that, but to do that, there's certain steps you have to take in order to get there. And I think Town Administrator Helen may have been interested in talking about some of those steps. One of those steps that I've been pushing for was the first step, and that's a sustainability committee. And so, and it's flexible as to what it can be, or it could even be an outside entity that we contract with, I think. But I just, there's a lot of different things we can do around sustainability, even if we don't become a climate leader. And there's also grant funding under our current status that we could use, and technical assistance we can use to move the ball forward towards getting there. I did a while ago put together like a resolution around a sustainability committee, but I think it had too many people on it, or it was pulling too much expertise. So I'll hand it over to Jamie if he has any comments on.
I mean, the only comments I have, I think, are number one, I think the sustainability committee is something that people can do for free. I mean, I think, you're gonna put out a post, we can do a charge. I think after that, I think becoming a climate leader with these other requirements, I think, while in my heart and in my philosophy, support a lot of this, as a manager, we've obviously got an incredibly great track record on being a green community. We have we had a fellow here from UMass Lowell. In fact, I should share it with everybody. We did a story map on our decarbonization efforts with, all the composting at all the schools. I mean, she went around, took some photos, talked about the solar farm on Union Street, looked at all of our LED lights, looked at all of our water and sewer pump stations with mechanicals. So we've got a very strong record on this issue. I think our failure, if you will, and this has been an issue for some time, is we've not done a very good job telling the story of what we have done. I think we've done incremental stories. We've been on television, we've been on Channel 10, I mean, we've done news stories, but, they kind of come in and come out. And, Steve's been along with me for the ride. I mean, I think we've all tried to tell the story in different ways, and it doesn't seem to always get out there. But I think once you get to goal 3, and you're saying by 2050, and then a municipal decarbonization roadmap, I think, in goal 3, 4, a zero emission vehicle policy, which we already have, but the problem is you can't buy a Vector truck that's zero emissions, right? You can't buy a fire ladder truck yet, an ambulance and stuff like that. But once you get into number 3, 4, 5, you're talking about you're talking about an extraordinary amount of money locally to do that, and I'll just be blunt, there's no way we're going to have the money to do any of this. And you'll see this on the Joint Budget Subcommittee next week to review the capital plan from last year, look at the 5-year forecast, look at the district improvement plan from the Franklin Public Schools. Brutus has laid out over 25 slides, kind of just an architecture of what the spending would be required for water, sewer, stormwater, trash, roads, highways, trees, parks. I think once you get into that stuff and you get into this, you're gonna, at some point, and I've said it before, and I mean it completely respectfully, at some point we've got to start setting the expectations properly in the community, because you're just simply never going to raise the money or raise taxes enough, or water fees and bus fees and stuff. Like, you're just not going to raise that kind of money, because now affordability has been a big concern. So we're working against that. Also, I'm concerned about local governments dictating citizen behaviors a little. Some of this gets into a zero decarbonization of the community is not just the government It's also homes, cars, private residences, businesses. You know, that gets to be sometimes a difficult thing. And then third, we've just seen the first year of a decimation of the federal system of subsidies, credits, tax credits. I mean, you've seen Ford basically get rid of all their electric vehicle. You know, so I think politically on a national level, we still can as a country kind of rationalize all around this. State grant programming is there now, but ARPA ends in a few months. And I think grant money is going to continue to dry up significantly. I think healthcare and education are going to still continue to carry the day in the state budget. I think a doable objective in the next 2 years for this legislative session is setting up a sustainability committee. It's free, it does get citizen engagement, it does get people involved. It keeps some eyes and ears on the national ecosystem, the international one. So I think that's a very doable goal. It does make, you know, then there's 2 goals done, so it's incremental improvement. But I think you're going to find that some of this other stuff is extraordinarily expensive, and I think it's going to be very challenging. So,
Thank you, Mr. Helen. Would you be amicable to, you know, having the sustainability committee as a goal, but also going down the roadmap as grant funding, applying for grant funding and technical assistance from the state program, and just applying it as it becomes available towards those goals?
sure, or needs. You know, absolutely, 100%.
So, like,
If there's funding out there, we'll take it. Absolutely.
so I mean, you know, in terms of doing what is in the roadmap or applying to, have we applied for the latest round of Green Communities funding, and have we applied for technical assistance in the past?
Yeah, we've received, you know, well, I mean, easily over $1 million, couple $1 million over the course of my 10 years here. But I will say grant programs are getting much more competitive. We used to get, every grant we filed with DOER, we used to automatically get. Now we don't automatically get them anymore because, you know, which is a good thing, every city and town is applying. So it just becomes a much more competitive round. And truth be told, while the governor and lieutenant governor do a great job spreading the wealth throughout the state, you know, they're generally, I think, going to go towards communities that are in higher need, that don't have the ability to pay, as Franklin does, for stuff. Which again, I think is the right thing to do, but that doesn't necessarily make Franklin a more competitive community in some of those grant programs. Kevin's done a great job trying to leverage some of these fellows, like for example, from UMass Lowell. It's kind of like the interns we have from Franklin High, which you're going to see a great, they're doing an unbelievable job on a tax project right now. I can't wait for this to be over. These kids are so bright, but I think we're trying to leverage a lot more of that. So we've applied for DOE funding. We've gotten rejected a bunch of times recently. And so I think as sustainability has now become kind of a part of the fabric of local towns, I think you're getting, you know, obviously a lot more communities to apply for them, which is wonderful, but it also makes us, you know, puts us at a competitive disadvantage to get those money. So, you know, but we can have the sustainability committee, and we can certainly, you know, put in the charge some language that you just suggested, you know, in terms of looking out for grant funding, working with a point person on staff to try to make sure that those grants go to the state and that we're getting the right letters out, that Rep. Roy and Senator Rauscher putting in a good word with the administration. Those are very helpful. You know, things of that sort, you know, and hopefully over the next couple of years, you might be able to see some sort of, you know, some sort of money come into the town.
And specifically in terms of the technical assistance, have we been applied to that in the past as well, or just the grants?
I believe both.
Okay.
You know, I'd have to check with Kevin. I know he applied for a part-time sustainability coordinator a couple times and got rejected. And that's why we went with the free fellow from UMass Lowell. I mean, I have to check with Kevin, but you know, I think most opportunities we try to get something. I will say in the transition from Mike to him, and the fact that he didn't have a deputy and some other people were out, maybe, you know, he missed a technical assistance round, but it still bears, like, it's tough when you're in a competitive grant round, and I know this sounds tough, but we don't apply for everything all the time. There's just no time to do that. And so if you're applying to a grant that you're not going to get, it's literally then just a waste of time. So I think our staff tries to do the best to balance that stuff. And I know we got rejected a few times. So, you know, same thing with Complete Streets. You know, we got a couple big awards up in the front. And as more communities got their policy in gear, then more applicants, less money, more applicants, less money goes around. So we kind of benefited from being on the front end of these things pretty well, where we were part of a limited amount of communities applying, and so we were getting grant money every year. That's how we were able to do all of our sewer pump stations, water pump stations, our LED lights, all sorts of stuff. So, and also the incentives through National Grid are drying up from the federal level. We've benefited significantly from a lot of free money from National Grid, particularly the charging stations out here, right? A whole bevy of charging stations around town, a whole bunch of other stuff. National Grid through net metering credits. You know, and the market's just changing now. I mean, I don't think I need to tell you, you're pretty up to speed on a lot of this stuff. But it would be a relief for a committee to be out there doing their own, taking a little bit of the effort off the staff to kind of keep their eyes and ears on this stuff. And I just have to set the expectations with them that, you can't be calling Kevin every day. You got to kind of, maybe a monthly check-in or something of that sort. But happy to do that, and hope that answers your question.
Okay. Yeah, I would be satisfied with trying to achieve as much of the sustainability goals as we can with the resources we currently have and with grants, and no new resources other than that.
Sure.
Is that fair?
That's absolutely fair.
Okay.
100%.
Council Moore.
Thanks. I guess again, what's the goal? Like, what do we want to do? I know when we were setting goals last winter, we walked through this, and Jimmy had the same comments that he just iterated now, and I looked at as we go through all of the levels of this next level of certification. It's like, we're never going to get there. We're never going to spend that much money. And I don't even know what the benefit would be at the end of the day if and when we did that, especially considering our financial circumstances now. I don't know what the committee, what are we setting them up to do? I don't understand, like setting up the committee I know is kind of step one, and then we apply for grants and we hire somebody to help us figure out how we're going to do what we're not going to do. I don't see the sequence of it, and I don't see the benefit. I'm not opposed to it, I just don't understand it, and I don't see how it plays out to our benefit. In my period.
Right, period, that's not a question. Exactly. Councilor Griffin.
Did you want to respond?
It's up to you, Chair.
Yeah, you can
Yeah,
respond.
no, I think part of it is even though we're not getting the certification, there are costs to climate pollution. And so by, doing our part as a community, within reason to reduce our emissions, we're creating less climate events like hurricanes and tornadoes and floods and all that other fun stuff. And I think we don't see the results of that, but I think it is still important to have an impact on those things, even if it, doesn't necessarily affect us directly 100%. But I think the effect on the climate is real, and that it's human-made, and that if we don't take action collectively, I think we all sort of pay the price. So I think, like I said, even if we're not becoming a green leader community or climate leader community, I still think that there is some worthwhile to doing it in terms of, and it's not just climate emissions. I think part of it is waste management and making sure we, don't put stuff into landfills, and, I think that's a part of it too, composting. So those are all sustainability as well. Maybe not traditionally, in terms of energy, but the things that are, might affect us later down the line when we have, methane coming out of our landfills and going out into the atmosphere. So that's where I'm coming from with it. And I think if you do get the goal, it'd be nice to get the grant funding, but I think at this point, we might have to walk there very slowly. So.
I should have gone first. You took the only remaining points I have there. But I'm not going to say anything new. There's no way we're going to become a climate leader, but I do think that it is something worth reaffirming our commitment to trying to build and act sustainably, even if we're never going to get there. If we had endless amounts of money and Franklin was where we wanted it to be, that'd be the next thing we do. I think I would support that 100%, but we just don't. But To your point, I was going to say other things like composting. I know that we had a resident who'd emailed about composting initiatives and how she'd like to see Franklin participate in something like that. I have reached out to the DPW about that. You know, there are other sustainable measures, and I think having a sustainability committee might allow more people, you know, to Jamie's point, it's free. People who are interested in it are the ones who are going to be, you know, putting their names out for it, and because they're interested, they're going to be looking into different measures, seeing what could work, kind of doing the research on their own. I think it's worthwhile to stand up a sustainability committee if we can, to look into some of those. But you know, I don't think that becoming a climate leader is on the horizon for Franklin anytime soon. And I think it would be, I think taking the small steps that we can would be great, but I think trying to take those large steps to get there would be a waste of our time. So that's why.
Thank you. Gino Colucci, 1 Tony Lane. I wouldn't be quite so pessimistic about achieving climate leader status, mainly because, first of all, the decarbonization requirement is a 24-year, it's by 2050, and hopefully we'll make progress during that time. And the requirement for zero-emission vehicles is when practical, so it's not practical to get a VAX truck that's EV. You don't have to get one for that. However, I think it's great if you support creating a sustainability committee, and part of their charge could be to look deeper into what measures would be needed to achieve that status, to talk to the other towns. Many other towns have already achieved that, and the grants are getting more competitive, and if you do achieve that status, you have a leg up on the other towns that are applying for grants. So I think it does make sense to move forward with the Sustainability Committee. That's all. Thank you.
I guess I'll add, I think it's under economic development, because technically at some point in time it could drive economic development. I mean, quite frankly, it could. I don't, this is, to me, to answer your question, Councilman Malloy, it's kind of like a no harm, no foul. I mean, if we create a committee, the charge of that committee will be to produce a roadmap. And I think things that come up, the other thing I think it also does is that committee may be all jazzed up to get sustainability, and then they'll realize, well, it's going to cost us $50 million to do that. It's more people that learn how much it costs to do this is better for us. But to Carlo's point, we don't know what we don't know, and I think that it's worth the time and the effort. The only question I have, and we certainly can figure that out, is I don't know what the right size of this committee is, and I was trying to find I was doing it last night, and I was trying to find other charters that are out there that we could leverage, like as I try and do with most things. I try and copy from someone else's done. Is it 7 people? Is it 9 people? Is it 5 people? I don't know what the right number is, but I certainly would be advocate for creating it, working with the staff. As you point out, the technical, I was reading that, so get $150,000 if we're able to get that grant to get it started. We get $150,000 to help them build a roadmap. It's worth going through the exercise because we don't know what we don't know. You're right, it may end up costing lots and lots of money that we don't have, or it may cost us very little. We don't know the answer to that, but I'm sure whomever decides to join this committee will definitely be passionate people about this particular subject. If there's anything that you're gonna get, is you're gonna get very passionate people in this, for this committee. That's for darn sure. They are probably more passionate than any other committee that we probably have, in my opinion. So I'm definitely all for it, and I just think we need to figure out the size and kind of that charter piece to minimize the effort from the staff to create the charter or the goal of that. That's all. I don't want to reinvent the wheel.
Would you like us to draft something and then bring it back to the EDC before it goes to the council?
Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be wonderful. All in agreement with that? Good with that? Any other
Yeah,
comments
I
you
would
want to
just
add?
say, I think there are a lot of people who, in town who, and I support this, who care about sort of the energy side of things. But I also think the tricky part might be, talking about other kinds of things like water conservation, composting, that might not get as much attention. So just when crafting it, make sure you get people from diverse, or when appointing people, just make sure you get people from different policy perspectives around different kinds of conservation and sustainability.
Yeah, you could also have, I think, some people that apply that don't want to be sustainable. Right? and does this become like a little bit of a political football, right? Like, do people not want to do this? And I think
The fist fight club.
for the fist fight club. I mean, I just think part of this, unfortunately, you guys all know this, but it's just because nationally we just can't seem like healthcare to be able to figure out a big tent on this stuff. Sometimes it just becomes this tennis match, right? And I've never denied somebody to be on a committee, so I don't think that having an alternative view is necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes having some people that agree or disagree on some other issues, isn't a bad thing, right? For a committee like this to work out some of these things before a community that's overwhelmingly supportive of this issue, but there are people that I definitely know who are not supportive of this issue, for sure. So we'll try to craft something up based on other towns. It's very easy. I have a listserv, and I'll just put it out there, and I'll get 10 versions in an hour, a couple hours in a day, and we'll work with a couple of staff members to try to put something together for one of your next meetings in September.
Beautiful, thank you. All right. With that, let's move on to item number 5, a GATRA update. Marina. How would you like to begin?
I just wanted to pull it up.
Bring up the memo. Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So Morena Zelaya, Planning Director. I'm not gonna read the memo verbatim, but it's attached to the agenda if anybody wants to read it. I'll just give you some quick overviews of the last 6 months of GATRA's services in the region, including Franklin. So beginning on New Year's Day, GATRA began offering Saturday scheduled services or service on most holidays except for Thanksgiving and Christmas. So that's good because folks will actually be able to ride GATRA on holidays. So we've had some peaks and lows in ridership. As you'd expect, we had a lot of snow this winter, so February was a low month for ridership. There were 34,208 riders for fixed route in February, and then microtransit had 11,970. And then in April, for the data that we have, which goes through June, April was the highest month with 52,594 for fixed route and 26,193 for demand response. GATRA is relaunching Sunday fixed route service in some of our neighboring communities. And that's all being sort of tiered out just based on availability with riders, which there is a note here that says that they were going to be expanding it into Plymouth and Wareham. I'm not from Massachusetts. I don't always get the hams and the ams correctly, so apologies if I got it wrong. But Wareham in August, but they actually just recently amended that to say that that was on delay because of driver availability. So they're not sure when that's actually going to happen. Let's see. They're big, as was a lot for the region. Their big focus this year was the World Cup. They successfully ran 7 routes from hotels to the stadium, and they transported 6,615 people during the World Cup games. They used the Friendly as a dry run, figured out whatever kinks they had, and everyone will be glad to know that sort of no additional funds went to that from local assessments because of state funding that came through for those routes. So that's sort of the high level quick points of what the what GATRA's been up to so far these 6 months.
Perfect.
And Councilor Blanc, I know you had asked me some specific questions, and apologies that I wasn't able to respond to this in writing, but I did get some responses from GATRA. So ridership for Franklin for the period of July 1st of last year to June 30th of this year was 38,385. The local assessment, which is paid by the state, was 297,603. And I know Jamie had responded to you regarding the fixed route and just sort of the roadblocks with just even getting research done on that.
Okay. What did you say the numbers were for that fiscal year for Franklin?
For ridership,
Yeah, for ridership.
38,385.
And again, in looking at the memo that you put, that would be the equivalent of the demand response piece, correct? Because we are not a fixed route, we are
Yeah.
demand response.
Yes.
Yep.
Which is weird, because you just said we had 38, I'm assuming the numbers that are here, I'm assuming are GATRA in total?
GATRA in total.
Correct. So
Yeah.
what I'm kind of now confused about, if you said 38, but the 6 months had demand of 11,900, that doesn't jive.
So this is for a year.
Right, that's for a year,
Yeah.
but 38,000 in a year, if I
Yes.
divide that by 2, that's 19,000. That's more than the 11,900 they said over the 6 months. I'm not gonna, as you can tell, I'm a math guy, and I'm going to now question the numbers.
Oh,
But
no,
that's
You
not the-
should, no, you should.
The,
Those are months.
sorry, that's
Those
for
are
1
months.
month. 11,970 is just for February.
So it's showing February's the
Okay.
low.
Yeah, February is the
April's
low,
Okay.
April is the high.
Okay,
Yeah,
all right,
yeah.
okay, perfect.
Yes.
And I'm not going to question the numbers. Okay, well, thank you for,
Yep.
so 38,000 or about 3,000 a month, point to point.
Mhm.
Okay,
Yep,
okay. And you said about $200,000 is the cost for Franklin, but that is all funded by the state. There is, in
Almost.
theory, no cost to Franklin.
yeah, almost 300.
The only cost was,
297, yeah.
Yeah.
clarification, so very shortly, Franklin used to have a deal with GATRA where all of our seniors rode for free to the senior center. Pandemic hits, executive director leaves, new director comes in for a year and a half, has an awful time. And he comes in and then charges us the full rate in the middle of the lockdown and decides he's gonna change course, no conversation. Jeff Roy and I had some very serious conversations with them about whether they wanted us in GATRA or whether we were gonna legislatively go to Metro West. That ended up bringing forth some collaboration. Rep Roy and Senator Roush were effective in getting us about $20,000 a year for a couple of years in federal money for I think 2021 and 2022. And part of the deal we made with GATRA was we were still gonna have a $1 ride to the senior center, but that Franklin, as the state was paying our way for a little bit, we committed to taking that in year 3, 4, and 5, whatever, in perpetuity. We now have $37,000 in the budget. I had cited in an email to you guys that it was 20, but it's now 37. 2 years ago, the ridership started to go up, and we needed to still cover that cost. So it's flatlined out. It may still go up and down a little bit, but it's $37,000 in cost for us. But I just want to also note, we have a lower rate for our seniors to go to the senior center than the other towns do in the southern part of the district. As you look at the GATRA map, you can easily tell there's a stop in Medway, a stop in Franklin, and then a bulk of it is Attleboro, Taunton, and a bunch of other communities down further in the greater Attleboro area. So our residents are still getting a heavily subsidized rate, which is good for them because it still drives those numbers up. If we don't do that, obviously there's huge concern. If Sarah was here or Chastity from the senior center, they would tell you they would easily see a significant drop, like half of their population, if not more, would stop going. I just want to say that because our residents are still getting a phenomenally better deal than other communities. Now that the new GATRA administrator's there, Mary Ellen, I've talked to her a few times about the idea of the fixed bus route. It's just not something that they have the capacity to do, and Marina and I have been talking about how to get some technical assistance grants, or maybe through Depot Street mitigation or a variety of other things. where we can get the money to go out and do a cost analysis of how many stops, where the stop's gonna be, you know, how many staff is it gonna take, how many hours is the bus gonna be, what's the cost of the bus, the maintenance of the bus, the gas of the bus, the benefits of the employees. You know, logistically, this is a very expensive item to do. And I think why we're not making as much progress as quickly as we are is that we don't really have a roadmap as to how to implement that. We don't really know how much that's gonna cost. So I think from our standpoint, that's the next piece, is trying to figure out how we can get an earmark or a grant or an appropriation. It could even be a capital item, just saying. If we had free cash available, we could do it. But we'd probably get somebody like MAPC or Regional Planning Agency or somebody, this is really what they do best, to try to visualize for people what exactly this is gonna cost. And I think that would be really helpful, I think for me, also probably for you and everybody, to know like, okay, how much is this gonna cost? It's gonna be a very, very expensive endeavor. And that's when we engage Rep. Roy and Senator Roush to work with GATRA at the state level, because all their money comes from the federal and state government. We can work with Congress and Auchincloss. How are we going to implement this? I think there are more choices available to us to implement this, but we still have to have some sort of an idea of what this is, what it's going to be, with a map, the stops along 140, where can people get on and get off. As you see here, the data at least shows that there's stable, if not increasing demand. So I think we're seeing that, which is a good thing, to try to get some subsidies for this as well. So I just want to make sure, I know I sent you an email before, I said 20 grand, but it's actually 37.
Okay. One other question before I turn it to the other counselors. On that 38,000 riders, that costs about 300, that's being covered. Is there any expense for the riders when they take a ride? Is it 100% free, or do they pay?
No, I think it's $1 or $2.
I think it's $2.
Yeah.
It's $1 for Franklin residents and $2 for, you can choose between like a Franklin option and a Ever People option.
But that's exactly what I just said.
Yeah.
So everybody else is paying $2 in Attleboro, Taunton, Middleborough,
Okay.
Wareham, you know, et cetera, and Franklin residents are paying $1. That's definitely a good reason why you have a solid number of usage. So
Yeah.
I know this is going to be shocking to everybody, but the lower the fare, the higher the usage.
And that does that 38,000 include the senior ridership, or is that in?
Yeah.
Okay, so embedded in that.
That takes care of everything.
So it's senior
Yep.
center ridership plus whatever
And the
else
food
is-
pantry.
And, all right,
We added the food pantry stop in, I think 3 years ago or 2 years ago. So that amount in our local budget of 37,000 encompasses all of that.
okay.
In addition to the obviously the fares that people are paying, not from Franklin to come to Franklin, that through the 300,000 or so that Marina cited a minute ago.
Okay, all right. I have other questions, but I'm going to yield to my other counselors. I'll go to Counselor Griffith first.
I actually don't have any questions on this right now.
Okay. None.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, as someone, I take public transit every now and then. Sometimes when I get my car maintained, I take GATRA. But I think my concern with the GATRA has been, like, with the Milfords, the Metro West, they like, everything's interconnected. You could get on a bus in Milford and it could take you all the way to Wellesley if you transfer.
Yep.
And you can't do that here. I think that sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, sometimes the rides aren't available, but you could take one of the GATRA buses to Mansfield and take the train to Providence, which is really nice, but it's very intermittent as to whether you could get that ride or not. So if there's some easier way to ensure the reliability between Franklin and that MBTA stop in Mansfield, that'd be really nice. I would like some more information about how the assessment to Franklin is calculated based on ridership. Like, is it per rider? Is it some fancy formula, like, chapter 70 is for the education? And would switching from fixed ridership to if we had fixed ridership in addition to sort of the rideshare model, whether it would just be, if the ridership stays the same, would the cost stay the same, or would it be some other formula? Like, I don't know how that works. So being able to understand that would be helpful, because if it's the same amount of riders, then why does it really cost us more? I don't understand that. And then just, in terms of, it's everything's in the master plan, I have friends in Providence who can't visit me because it's like just a pain to get here and they don't drive. Or if someone wants to come here from Worcester, they can't do it. They don't drive, they can't get here. So I have to do a lot of schlepping to visit my friends, and it could be tricky sometimes. So anything you could do to improve the connectivity between sort of the, RIPTA to the south, Mansfield, Worcester, if we could, in terms of, I've talked in the past about like Logan Express, having something like that in Franklin. That's sort of out of the scope of this conversation. But I think that in terms of just being able to connect things together, and I think maybe it'd be helpful with you network with your folks in Rentham, because there is a fixed line that leads up to Rentham outlets, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And if the Franklin line could connect through Rentham to that, then it's not just an empty destination. You can actually go to the rest of the network. And then the same thing with RIPTA. They end in Bellingham. They actually I don't know how they got permission to cross the state, but I believe they end in the Stop and Shop Plaza in Bellingham. So if Bellingham was able to connect to the Franklin, commuter rail somehow, we'd have to probably work out a deal with the MBTA and that kind of stuff. But like, there's a lot of people in Rhode Island who want to get to the T and they can't. And there's a lot of workers who are in, Woonsocket and Bellingham who work in Franklin and they don't have access to transportation to get here. So just being able to network everything together would be super helpful, and working with the communities, because if you build bridges with other people in the community, in the GATRA advisory board, you might have more leverage with some of the mayors. No leverage.
No. I think part of it, Councilor Mangello, is the ridership is just higher there, right? I mean, when you're talking about investments, I've had this conversation with GATRA for 11 years. I think this is a conversation to bring up with Rep. Roy and Senator Roush when they're here in September. They're here in a month on September 16th, because regional transit authorities is a line item in the state budget, and the jurisdictions that they serve are in the state budget. So this is one of those issues where, we can be good representatives on the board, but we're one vote out of whatever, 25. The chair and vice chair are almost always exclusively the mayor of Attleboro and the mayor of Taunton. They kind of just swap. So, but the ridership is enormous there, right? So, I think, relatively speaking, even though our ridership has improved, and I think it would go up a lot if we had a better route system, the GATRA's going to say, well, we need more ridership to justify the capital expense. And, at some point, it's like, I don't know how to fix all this. This is where Rep. Roy and Senator Roush become like very integral into how this is all done. They have to have a voice in this because they are the ones that can get money into the state budget to do more of these capital extensions, these connecting lines to try to make, at least connect the regional transit authority systems maybe a little bit more together, right?
Thank you.
Yeah.
A couple of quick questions. 38,000 rides in this past year in Franklin. I think you mentioned this, and I don't know if you have the answer, but are most of those rides to the senior center?
That I don't know. I would imagine so.
I would guess, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And how does it work? How does somebody, these are not fixed bus routes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So people are using an app and they're
Yep, and you're
calling?
scheduling it, you're calling it, you're,
Okay.
Yep.
And guarantee that you're going to get a ride? Maybe yes, maybe no.
I believe that is a guarantee that you're going to get a ride. Whether or not it's, going to come.
Question is timing, right?
Yes.
Yeah. You
Could
want it
take
in
a
20
couple
minutes,
hours,
it's going to
it
be
could-
2 hours.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. And they pay $1 in Franklin, and we pay $37,000 or so in our budget. And what is that $37,000 for?
It's to,
They don't pay the $2.
They don't pay the $2. Yep, that's exactly it.
So we're paying it.
Our residents
we're paying
get a
half.
$1 ride, everybody else in the system has to pay 2 or more depending on where they're at. Yep.
Yeah, I'm just not super familiar with how this works. And I know at one time we did have a fixed bus route in Franklin, yes?
Yeah.
Probably predates me.
Yeah, we did.
Okay.
When Gatra first
Steve,
came,
why don't you?
and I was on the council, we did have a fixed bus ride.
We did, because it actually turned around here and went down the other side. Steve Sherlock, 13 Magnolia Drive, Community Information Director, Franklin Matters. So yeah, we did have a fixed bus ride. I've got photos and the maps in my archives. I could pull it up and refresh you at some point in time. A couple of other points I was going to the senior center. In my conversations with them, amongst the seniors who try to use the service, it is not the easiest thing in the world, even if they're going to the food pantry or any other place, a doctor's appointment. You can make and negotiate to get that pickup, but then once you're there, you can't schedule your return. So you have to then try to schedule your return. That inhibits an awful lot of people from even trying to take the service. So while we have 38,000, the senior center folks could easily talk more to it, but in my own conversations, that number could easily, exponentially grow. If the service were more accessible for your phone app, many seniors generally, even if they have a phone, they're not necessarily comfortable using an app, right? So they'll use the phone. But then the scheduling process itself. Okay, if you get there, your doctor's office, it goes an hour, but then you got to call then, at that point, to schedule. You could be there an hour and a half, 2 hours, just waiting for the return ride. Never mind trying to do other things. For the other listeners, GATRA is clearly an acronym. Greater Attleboro Transit Regional Authority. So to Jamie's point, in terms of Attleboro and Taunton being the two, because that is GATRA and that everybody else is kind of like parties to that.
Right.
It's no surprise that they go back and forth. But yeah, there were regular routes, and when there was a regular route, because it did go up King Street and went into Central Park Terrace, so I did try it a couple of times to make sure I knew what was going on back in those days. But it's gone.
Do we know why it failed, or it's gone, or?
I believe it was more budget than anything else, because
ridership
budget.
It's ridership. And even if, just quickly, if you went to gatra.org and you go to routes and schedules, just
Yep.
the word Franklin doesn't exist. And I have fought this fight with GATRA for years. Jeff Roy has as well, Jeff Nutting did. If you don't even have the word Franklin as part of one of your routes, you just check out, right? Because you get the downtown Middleborough shuttle link, you've got the Medway T shuttle link, you've got the Taunton, Norton, Attleboro, Fall River, Taunton, Brockton Gateway link, you've got the Target, Plainville, Walmart Target, Market Basket. I mean, you've got things that the reality is just the demand has never really firmly been there, where I think GATRA can invest going up 495 into these communities. And this is like one of the things about Franklin that's fascinating. We're right smack dab in the middle, stuck in between 3 chambers of commerce. We're stuck between 3 regional transit authorities. So we're kind of like in no man's land. And I think from a GATRA perspective, again, I can't blame them. They've got the Wareham-Plymouth connection, right? To Max's point, some of the connection points that he's bringing up are real. But for a lot of other communities down the South Coast, Seekonk, Swansea, the buses are going in and out all the time, going to Providence in and out or whatever. So I think ridership and demand has been, has driven a lot of this. The medical appointments also were a driving factor in why we bought our own van at the senior center, which I will say took years to get. And one of the concerns we heard was what made me think of it was Steve. It's not the easiest thing. So to dedicate 1 or 2 days a week where people can get those really sensitive appointments to, Brigham and Women's or Longwood or Worcester, was something we worked for. I mean, maybe the last 7, 8 years. Yeah. We just got a sliver of a grant to pay for that van maybe 4 years ago, and then the pandemic thing made it a 2-year wait to get the van. The supply chain problems. But now that we have the van, some of those days and times are slotted for people who just can't do GATRA Go, or it's been very unreliable. So we've tried to pinch hit a little bit while we work on this bigger goal of how to get GATRA and the state to focus on Franklin a little bit more. Just a little bit of history there. Just
No,
so you
that's
guys
good,
know.
that's helpful, because I don't have that.
Fun acronym from the archives. In 2010, the FAB, Franklin Area Bus, actually was on the GATRA map.
There you go.
And one of the buses was Dean logoed,
Yep.
right? So it was painted as Dean because Dean was coordinating in, trying to boost the ridership back in 2010.
Somehow that rings a bell.
I just wanted to add, just so people don't know, when the bus picks you up, it picks other people along the route.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure that's clear, because it's not like you have a solo ride, a free solo ride or whatever for Uber. And then I think that, what was the other point I was going to make? Oh, well. But I think that usually what I do is that when I use it for something, when I'm getting my car maintained, is I'll schedule the return a trip in advance, so I know I have it before I schedule the first the trip to go there. So that way I don't have to worry about being stranded there.
Wow.
Well, I have my car there usually, but if I do go somewhere with it, I'll do the return trip in advance. And just so you know, if you want to stay off the roads, it is cheaper to take a GATRA bus to the train station than to park.
Look at that. That's a point. It's true.
You all set?
Yes, sir, thank you.
The only comment I'll make, I mean, it's funny that you say, Jamie, that we got to pay for a study. You would think that GATRA, that be part of their process, is to determine, is it cheaper to have a go route or a fixed route? That would just natively be in their, they would have the tools to be able to do that. It's just crazy that we have to spend the dollars to do it. And I do think this is about economic development. To minimize economic development will require more vehicles to be on the road. And if there's any way that we can mitigate that by creating opportunities for people that, especially that live along the 140 corridor, that we can minimize the traffic on 140 to put 10 people on a bus versus 10 cars, that's wonderful. And to your point, Councilor Margello, the fact that it doesn't interconnect is like going to two dead ends. It's just crazy to me that you can't get from point A to point B. So it definitely will be something that I know if I don't bring it up, he's going to bring it up when Councilor Ray and Councilor Rush are here. But we have to do something, and if it's not going to be with GATRA because they're treating us like a poor stepsister, then we gotta go someplace else. And I remember this debate when I was on the council 20 years ago. Was it GATRA or Metro West? And we chose GATRA, and 20 years later, I don't think that was the right decision, because we are being treated like a poor step. And I didn't notice until you pointed it out, we're not even don't even make their list, for crying out loud.
I've asked them.
We are not even a stepchild, we're not even in the family.
Like, could you just put the word Franklin? I mean, I can't even, I haven't looked at it in a while, and I can tell Marina's taking a note to go back and we just get the word Franklin to point people in a direction. A little frustrated, because I know I've asked this a million times, not of her, by the way, but just ask them, and I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I just looked and the thing is still not there, you know?
Yeah, and
I would finally say also the Dean College point is a good one from Steve. This discussion is bringing back a lot of history. Dean was a huge advocate and supporter. I'm guessing there might have been some financial contributions, which we could certainly, when they get a new president, talk to them about. I guarantee you, because working with Dr. Rooney for many, many years, her students rode those buses a lot. Mm-hmm. They want to go to Patriot Place. Yes. They want to go to Rentham Outlets. They want to come down to the grocery stores, like a whole bunch of stuff. Like, they were a big participant, and I did forget about that. But Steve's right. They were a big player for a while in this, which is probably how they got their logo on the bus, and there probably was some money behind of it. Mm-hmm. So at the right time, maybe Dean College, when they get a new president, we can talk to them again about this issue, because it's a big deal for Dean, for sure.
I guess my last question is, how do we go about sizing what the cost is to do that study that you talked about, Jamie? How do we figure out what that cost is so that we can then figure out how we're going to fund it? Because I do believe, to your point, when Depot Street comes or whatever, that is part of their mitigation is you got to participate to help us solve the traffic that will be incurred by this. So I'd like to,
We can link up with MAPC if Marina and I need to get on a call with one of their transportation department heads. I think that's the easiest thing to get a ballpark number. I will admit, I'm making $30,000 up in my head, but I'm not making it up because I'm just plucking a name out of a hat. Usually these types of studies, you know, are not that expensive, but we can hop on with MAPC and just get an idea from them. You know, is it 40 grand, 35, 10, you know, just get a more accurate idea of what it would cost. Yeah, we can talk to them about that.
I mean, because I think the success of Franklin is not gonna be with point-to-point go transportation. It is gonna be with a fixed
Correct.
bus route.
And we can't finance this on our own. I can just tell you, just think as you could about the logistics. You have a bus route from, say, 6 to 6. What if somebody calls in sick? Bus driver, right? You got benefits behind that, full-time jobs, workers' comp. I mean, you're into a whole department, but I still believe GATRA doing this, if we could find a way with Jake Auchincloss and Rep. Roy and Senator Roush, I still think GATRA or an RTA is the one to do this because they've already got all those costs for property and casualty, fleet. They've got, you know, they've got all the infrastructure to be able to maintain this. So we'll get a number. We'll talk to MAPC and get a number of what a study would cost.
Yeah, I think that's the next steps.
I was just going to say, Marina had said before, they wanted to expand, but they can't get drivers, right?
Yeah, so we do have to keep that in mind, that
That's
even
another-
now, they're trying to, and they're still at the whims of driver availability, so.
Well, there's a way to solve that. Pay more money,
Yeah.
and therefore it costs more. It costs more, but there's.
This is why I say this is a I mean, I'm not trying to dish the rock here, but I am. You know, Rep. Roy and Senator Roush are the biggest voices in this conversation. Maybe Congressman Auchincloss too. You know, it starts, I think, in September. We'll get a number, and then we'll try to talk to them in September when the reps and senators come here.
Maybe we should get Congressman Auchincloss in front of us.
And he, by the way, was the only congressman in your town history who came here
Right.
and sat right there, and there was no question he was unwilling to answer. So I'm sure he'd be willing to come back. He's probably busy right now. But I think if we can put a cost out there and at least have a game plan, I think that'll allow the elected officials to really rally around all this stuff,
Okay.
which is good.
Thank you. Any other questions? Go for it. Councilor Griffiths. Now
Thank you.
she has questions or comments.
Yeah, sorry.
We spurred something.
Yeah, thank you. I should have asked to come back to me. So I will say, in volunteering at the food pantry, I have seen several times where people get dropped off and then immediately, like within 5 minutes, another GATRA bus comes and says, okay, I'm here to pick you up because you got dropped off. And they're like, I haven't even made it in the doors yet. So this is one of the things, and I've heard from the people who work at the food pantry, they are like, this is a constant problem. I mean, if I've seen it multiple times in the times that I've been there, then it's happening much more frequently. So I know that, you know, the food pantry as well as the senior center might be our two biggest drivers of a fixed route if we can possibly manage that. Jamie, you mentioned that we got compromised from GATRA by saying, you know, maybe we should go to Metro West instead. Have we ever looked at that since then, or was that conversation that long ago and we've just said, okay, we stuck with GATRA because Metro West comes to Milford, right? Like we're not that far off the Metro West side either. Maybe it would make sense to tap in there.
I think this is maybe something for also Rep. Roy during office hours at the senior center. GATRA, to their credit, Mary Ellen as well, the newer director, the previous director, Frank Gay, they visited and did sessions at the senior center. They took feedback. I think temporarily they maybe make some of these improvements that, you know, on these issues of drop-offs and stuff, or the app doesn't work, or, but then back to Marina's point, like they're struggling to get drivers, right? So we're expecting a system, which is the correct assumption. We should expect the system to work fairly flawlessly, right? We should expect that. I think in reality, it's a lot harder than that. But I also think in terms of going to Metro West or talking about a realignment, that's really a full conversation for Rep. Roy. We have not gone back to that conversation since Rep. Roy and I worked this deal out with them to keep the $1 fares during the pandemic, and then when the town put in our own ARPA and operating budget, we have not circled back to that since then. Partly, I think, because Mary Ellen as executive director has been very stable there, and it's been consistent. She's excellent. She comes from state government, so she has a good knowledge of that. I think some of the federal money disruptions are impacting RTAs because of cuts. Because at one point, GATRA's subsidies were 85% federal money, maybe 9 years ago. But I think this is a conversation maybe at office hours. I know you folks sometimes go, Max, sometimes you go to office hours, I go. We got to remind ourselves to talk to Rep. Roy about this issue next time. And if not, we can talk to him in September when he's here. Maybe we need to get that conversation going again. Maybe it makes sense from every party that we move. Maybe GATRA doesn't, I don't say they don't want us to, but maybe it makes more fiscal sense for the RTAs to have us with a different system. I don't know.
Or maybe there's a way to connect the two. Maybe we tap into both and we make a connector from GATRA to Metro West.
Can't do that, I think.
Well, no, but I think
Can't
to your
make a
point,
connector?
Council Griffith, you're spot on. I think if we were able to get MAPC to draw what a 20-stop, my vision's always been Franklin Country Club to Gorelick.
Correct.
Back and forth all day long, like the San Francisco trolley, right? On, off, grocery store, pharmacy. Because everything that you're going to want to hit mainly is on 140 from an amenity standpoint. Dean College, Glen Meadow, all the apartments over here, like the residential, right? Downtown, the commuter rail. I mean, it's kind of all centered there. So maybe what we need to also ask them to do as part of the study is, well, when you get to Franklin Country Club, is there an extension to Rentham that you can do to the outlets? And then on the other side, maybe an extension twice a day. I don't, like an express train on the commuter rail, right? The express trains go 2 or 3 times each way, right? Maybe there needs to be that type of discussion as part of the study to find out where you can link up, to Councilor Margel's point, where you can go further, not just that fixed bus route that we're talking about. I mean, I think that's why, and I do agree with Councilor LeBlanc. I mean, to put this on GATRA should be a very reasonable request. On the other hand, I bet you they would say the same thing. I'm going to use the money to pay the drivers more to get a driver. So
We'll pay for it.
they're stuck in no man's land because they're just receiving federal and state money among everybody. And it's been so inconsistent for the last 7 years. We'll have to peel the onion back with them a little bit more on some of this stuff. But I think the connection point is a really good point.
So I actually, I think if MWRTA was willing to connect to the Rhode Island RIPTA, I think it might actually make sense because then you have a line to Providence, you go to Worcester, it may take a while, but you get there. I'm not in favor of abolishing the sort of the rideshare model entirely, but I do think that maybe we can have them filter feed, or feed the main line or something like that. Because then there would be people who, are outside of the line who wouldn't be able to access it if we removed it entirely. So worth figuring out how to transition. But yeah, if we switch to the MW system, I think as long as there's a way to get to the Rhode Island system, that might make sense if they agree to it.
Marina, anything else you'd like to add?
Nope.
Good?
I think I've got my marching orders.
Okay. All righty. All right, that wraps that up. Number 6 is new growth follow-up. So this is a follow-up from our meeting last time, some additional information. Jamie, I don't know if you want to add some color to the documents that were attached or whatnot.
Very quickly, the assessors sent offline to everybody the list of outstanding permits. The thing I would quickly note is that out of the hundreds that are open, the good news is that the overwhelming majority of these are recent. If you had 20 pages of outstanding permits dating back to 2011, maybe there'd be a little bit more concern, saying why are all these outdated? But I think as you can see here, the staff do a pretty good job keeping these up to date. There's a story, I'm sure, behind almost every one of these. But then also, I think what we weren't able to forward out, and now it's linked to the agenda, is the actual permitted projects in town that have not been built yet. And what we did is, thanks Marina, we basically tried to say, okay, we'll use Balsam Estates. You know, 2-acre single-family homes, it's approved, construction's not complete. You've got an appraised value for each lot at about $380,000. I mean, obviously, when those are built, you know, those are gonna be much more valuable. I don't know what the holdup is on that particular one. Madeline Village has been in negotiation, I think, at the state level. You know, we're happy to answer any questions to the best of our ability on any of these. Some of them are just simply ones that have just been, you know, recently approved too, like Daniel Street, Grillo Estates, that's something very recent. Panther Way, very recent. Partridge Street, very recent. And then down about halfway through, yep, you can see pending before the planning board, or the board. Obviously, Stobart's is not pending before the board, but that's the technical term. And then you've got 9 Main Street that just filed, and so we have like in there pending where those are projects that we know are happening. I would note on 444 East Central, I would assume, based on the appeal, that we'll see finality to that sometime this calendar year. 9 Main Street just got withdrew. They'll be in 12 to 15 Main Street. Just got withdrawn and will be on August 24th, as we just heard from Marina. 266 Pleasant Street is a very small 4 single-family homes. And then 202 Washington Street was actually a unanimous friendly 40B because it was for sale. 25% of those, to Councilor Marangella's point earlier, because the affordables are so affordable, the non-affordables are a little more expensive. And so there you see that cost share and that equity. But as you can see, the amount of projects pending are very few. And that's, from my standpoint, the biggest concern across the board is that there's really nothing that's being applied for. And I think that culture right now is something that the EDC and others on the council are going to have to talk about at some point. You know, obviously 202 is before the ZBA right now, and I assume that will go through at some point, but you only got a few projects here that are lingering. And then down below, Marina put in a list of the approved or pending commercial projects, and you can see there too, not a long list. Most of them are really around King Street, where everybody asked, why are the trees getting cut down? There's a warehouse being built there. And so we've tried to lay out the best we can what projects are currently in the pipeline. So this is a comprehensive list of what has been approved but not built, and also what's pending. Happy to answer any questions, and obviously Marina as well.
Okay. Question?
Quick question.
Yep.
So this is permitted projects, that short list was the last attachment, and the spreadsheet with all the open permits, go back a couple of years.
Yep.
Most of it's this year.
Most of it in the last like 3 or 4 years, yeah.
So what's the difference between the two lists?
One are open permits like gas, wiring, electrical, occupancy, you know, all the
Just open permits.
all
okay.
the open permits like your bathroom, you know, Mike's pool, you know, whatever else. This is actual parcels with structures.
I got it, thank you.
Yep.
But this is not, I would say this is not an all-encompassing list because it's missing Grove Street, it's missing Acorn Place, yada, yada, yada.
So those would be on the list that the assessor
Okay.
provided, because they actually had building permits pulled.
So these are permitted with no building permits pulled?
Right.
Yes.
That's what this list
Yes.
is? Okay. But that's not the case because 55 King Street is on the assessor's list. So, it's, again, it's semantics in the grand scheme of things. It's, you get the point, I mean, I certainly have taken the data, and to your point, Jamie, and that's what we were also looking for. Was there a lot of older projects on here that haven't been closed out? And I took the data that Kevin provided, and ultimately, if you look at 2023 and earlier, there's about 20, 30 projects for about $16 million that, at least the way that they've been, when the permit was presented, that's what the value of it was. And I even carved out, and if you carve out Lake Acorn, you carve out Grove Street, and King Street, and one other one I carved out. Actually, East Central, the apartments and condominiums at East Central. There's still a healthy amount in there. What is, as I've always been a proponent for, is the number in my head is $350 million above and beyond what we generally produce. And when you look at the file that was sent, you look at it, you add it up based upon the values that were there, it was $750 million. The problem is, a third of that is the school, it's the Tri-County school, so that's not a taxable event. The other third of it is either town projects or dean projects, which is not a taxable event. So we're down to about $260,000 of project, and that includes Grove Street, King Street, the four things I just threw off.
Zoom has a hands up.
Yeah. So while I'm looking for 350, there's only 250 in the pipeline. So we have to find a way to add. The point of this was to figure out what we need to kind of project out. And while I'm hoping that the Grove Streets project, which hopefully will come in over $100 million assessed value, that will be above and beyond. The problem is that may be the only, to your point, as you were saying at the beginning of the meeting, Jay, there's nothing coming in front of the plant. That may be the number that is used for 2028's growth number, is literally that whole project is the growth that's out there. So we have to find a way to balance, to add not beyond Grove Street to other areas. But again, it has to be smart. I will always preface when I say growth, it has to be smart growth. And I'm kind of stalling a little bit because I had to Constable Angello, looks like.
I'm trying to get Gus on, there we go.
Yeah, that's Gus.
It's getting there.
All right, Gus, we're getting you.
Gus, you're in, you can just unmute yourself.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Mr. Chairman, thank you for recognizing me, Jamie.
Yeah.
Just real quickly, 164 Grove Street was farm can, I believe. It was going to be a medical marijuana dispensary. That is still showing as an open permit. We had thought that was going to get built, and that is lingering now on our open permit list. And there's several that are also other departments that use OpenGov as well. They don't linger as long as some of them. They're usually paid in the first day or so that they're applied for. Building permits do linger quite some time because there's inspections that have to be done.
Okay. Thank you. Well, we'll certainly digest it. It was good information. It will actually be important information, I think, for the budget subcommittee, because I think they should leverage these numbers to help them with their forecasting of what the potential new growth numbers are going to be. But you definitely gave me a big pause, Jamie, and I really, in some ways, wasn't looking at it that way when I'm looking at planning board meetings being canceled. It's because just no one's coming to do development, and that's that's going to become problematic. And I say that problematic from a financial standpoint. There are other implications from that, and I'm only bringing it up from just a pure tax revenue standpoint when I make that comment. So, any questions? Okay. Last up is next meeting in September. Jamie, did you want to add a little bit more color for this? I mean, we've talked about this. Hopefully we can.
The only quick thing I was going to mention is I did ask all of the boards to bring at least 5 recommendations on tweaks to the bylaws that they believe would be advantageous. You're going to get a request from the Conservation Commission to do a bunch of bylaw changes that, may or may not, be exactly like how do we streamline permitting, but they're also going to bring those recommendations as well. They've been working on a bylaw cleanup for a long time. But they're also going to bring, I think, some recommendations. So the Planning Board, ZBA, we did invite Design Review, and the Conservation are all going to come. I've gotten confirmations from each of the boards that there's going to be at least membership there. They may be a posted meeting or 2, and they're going to give you at least 5 ideas. If they have 8, if they have 2, I said bring whatever you want, but just aim for like 5 so we can have a digestible amount. And I gave the directive, I think, and everybody reached out to their boards saying, you know, some actual ideas that can help you guys try to streamline our permitting process. So that'll be on the 17th. And then there's an open night on September 30th if folks want to have a meeting, because there's no council meeting that night. And so just as a heads up, you know, that's something where you might see some rezone stuff, form-based code. You know, we can talk about a variety of different things that y'all want to talk about. So if you want to let me know, or you can continue some of these other conversations that we've had on that night.
Okay.
And then I'll try to reach out to everybody about October, November, December. You know, it's going to get a little tight because there's a lot of meetings, but I think you guys are rolling, and maybe you might want to consider having a couple meetings a month. Just because you have a lot of goals, a lot of discussion. This stuff's very complicated. Once the public gets engaged in some of these things, the meetings will be longer. So we'll try to get everybody some dates on the calendar for the fall meetings. Other than that, that's about all I got.
Thank you. Councilor Lori, anything to wrap up? Any
No,
comments?
all set, thank you.
Councilor Margillo stepped out. Councilor Griffith?
All good.
All right, with that said, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you all. Appreciate it.